think it's about that time. I do want to just check. It does kind of feel like my screen is more red than usual, and I'm wondering if it's actually affecting. No, this looks kind of normal-ish. Whoa, 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 whoa. Why does it keep becoming blue? Oh, it's because I'm watching it. I see. That's why. All right. How does this make sense? How is it doing this? Doesn't it usually... Oh, no, I guess this makes a lot of sense. It's the my image is getting overlapped by itself. And then, and then this ghost is going to keep going. All right, we got to stop. We got to stop this. This is rookie stuff. Fun stuff first. We hit the path to affiliate. We finally got the one piece of the criteria that we were missing, which was the, if I could find it. Yo, what's good, Onion Helmet? What? It doesn't even show us anymore. Oh no, maybe I have to go to the dashboard. Yeah, we finally hit this. We finally hit this stuff. So we have the path to affiliate complete, but we are going to hold off so that no one gets ads. So I don't know if it makes sense at all to do this just for the few features that we get, which would be custom emojis and custom polls. Polls are going to be nice, but we need more people to actually answer the polls. I still don't think we have more than like, you know, that thing just shows that we get like an average of 3 people on 4 out of 30 days. So subscriber button, emotes, channel points, predictions, and polls. Yeah, so that I don't think that's worth it yet to withstand the downside of ads. Should I not just wait as long as I possibly can before getting affiliate, or like do people just jump over because they want to make like the smallest bit of money? Yeah, we might want to wait a long time then. I'm not sure. We'll have to hear it out. But anyway, today we were doing a Bernardo Kastrup deep dive. So please let me know if there's something we have to hit. I was thinking the first thing we do, just to get it cooking, is start a deep research thing. I should have done this honestly before we started this stream. Like I should have done this an hour ago because it might take 20 minutes to an hour. Can you give me the full rundown of Bernardo Kastrup? I need everything from his come up to his prevailing beliefs, thoughts, contributions, etc. Should I just leave it there? See what it says? See what it gives me for that thing? Yo, Darmadon, what's good? What are we up to? I think we're doing a deep dive on Bernardo here. We haven't done a deep dive on like a single person, I guess, yet. So I'm going to try to see how that works today. Yeah, people usually jump over immediately into affiliate. They'll get a few subscribers here and there, and Twitch takes half of that income. Wow. Emotes are also limited. Since the more subscribers you have, the more emotes. There are follower emotes, but I haven't seen much use of emotes from other channels in other chats. Okay, so let's play this game. Let's see how long we could go without being forced to do affiliate. I think yeah, only when it really makes sense. Like we have a decent amount of people, and it would make sense that like that we would get a ton of subscribers, activity going, and you know, the ads actually matter. You know, because at the end of the day, I am trying to shift into this as my full-time job. I would like to be able to work on this stuff all day, every day. I think it would be beneficial. But I don't think it makes sense to just jump over now. I saw an interview with Alex where he was asked, what religion do you want to win? And he said, Advaita. Nice. That's pretty lit. Advaita's got the Alex thumbs up. Okay, so currently this is what's going to be in the research plan. Research Kastrup's biography, including his academic background and his professional history, such as his work at CERN, to understand his career trajectory. Define and explain his core philosophical position of objective idealism. Compile a list of his major contributions. Analyze his primary theories and metaphors. Investigate the reception of his work by searching for critiques, counterarguments, and debates. Compare and contrast with historical idealist philosophies. Explore his thoughts on specific topics. Okay, this is great. Synthesize all the gathered information and provide a comprehensive overview of his influence and significance in the ongoing philosophical discourse about the nature of reality. Beautiful. Let's just start that. So this is going to take a while. Let's get some confirmation that it's going to just keep going on its own, though. I think if I go... Yeah, I think now, if I were to X out of this, it's going to tell me I'm on it. You could leave this chat in the meantime. All right, we're going to just let this thing go. Then I was thinking we get some... We're not going to watch the videos right now, but let's get some videos tabbed up, queued up, just because it might be nice. So I thought this... Pay Attention to Life is great. This is what we're dealing with in terms of part 2 stuff. This is part 2 stuff. The whole thing is art. I think what he's referring to is maybe a relationship with you and the universe, considering this is like a way we can think about the world. Does anyone see this? We have a few problems. Uh-oh, we got an ad.
That way.
Oh.
What way do you see things?
I think
Was this the right timestamp, or did I click through this already just because I was curious what was going on here? Is there a timestamp I should hit, or was this just the we have a few yeah, I just referenced this vid. You might have clicked through it. Okay, I did click through it already. I haven't watched any of this, but where are the problems here?
It's penguin, yeah. E pluribus.
Is he talking about penguins?
one of my favorite from Coulter.
It is penguin, yeah. E pluribus awesome.
What?
E pluribus awesome.
Is that in Spanish?
Yeah, that's right. It's the encroachment of...
Okay. The first problem is that this is the guy you're challenging. What is Pro doing? I don't know. I don't know what this show is. I think we're all about collaborating with anyone, provided that it's a productive conversation. Hopefully this is a productive conversation. I like what's going on here. This is pretty interesting. This is more interesting than what I got going on behind me. The second is that this has undoubtedly distracted the viewership from the public document endeavor. The good news is that my idea about dancing half naked, oh yeah, and sitting with a suit in the middle of a room seems to work. I think you're right. Matan is like chaotic neutral. It's entertaining. Oh, nice.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the...
Okay, so maybe we have to do a... I don't think we should do deep dives on everyone and anyone. I think perhaps we should save that for philosophy people only, but yeah, he's out there. He's getting it done. Okay. So I'm surprised. A lot of this stuff is like motivational stuff. If he's into the motivational stuff, why not go all the way, you know? Why not build out your own Kastrup document? Part 2 it. All right, popular. Actually, should we just check out oldest? 15 years ago. That's pretty great. Oh man, starting with TEDx. I mean, TEDx isn't TED, but it's still cool. Yeah, this guy's OG. Okay, on death. Can we get it like a nice, yeah. Materialism versus idea. Okay, this is gonna. Are we gonna have to get into the debate today? Is this guy all about what I've been talking about for the past, like, I don't know, 20 days? How does he not break character? That is pretty incredible. I'm sure there's probably some people they bring on that make him closer to breaking character than others. Oh, this is okay. I didn't realize Kastrup, views wise, Kastrup's not getting like the highest views for his top videos, which means that this is a more feasible link up. Defense of his second PhD. Wow, this guy can put in work. Top. Okay, this is what we need to know. That's what we need to know. We have a natural. Okay, what do we need? What do we want? Is baloney. Should we do this one? I feel like this is going to be outdone by the other one. Was this what was the one that had that same? It was right here. So 11 years. That's 11 years. All right, we got to do it again. This Thursday, I think we're just going over, hopefully, a rough draft of the new script for the follow-up video on consciousness, where we really take it to the edge. And I did pull the trigger on a teleprompter, so we will get, hopefully we'll get that going. Oh, the report is ready. All right. All right, we could keep it there. Why so much suffering? Oh, this is a good one to end off on, because this is what we have to end off on in the document. Make sure you put Alex O'Connor in the title and mention his name once, so it's technically not clickbait. Yeah, it's gonna be tough to put Alex's name in the title this time. It's like last time it was stretching it. I mean, granted, I kind of still went after him, but this time I think I don't know if it makes sense to do that. It would have to be like Challenging Alex Part 2 or something like that. Which maybe that's something worth doing, but it wouldn't make sense for him to be in the. Yeah, it wouldn't make sense for him to be in the thumbnail. So I don't think it makes sense for him to be in the title either. I think we should just. I'm drinking tea, some chamomile tea. Cheers. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to do something a little clickbaity, like putting the consciousness debate to rest, or getting to the edge of consciousness. So I don't know, something weird, something like that. But we're gonna be talking the usual stuff. It's gonna be half like a logical argument, and then half of it's gonna be looking into, okay, what is actually the closest neural correlates we have to consciousness that people want to see? Because I think the unsatisfying thing about the previous video is I really don't acknowledge this idea that, like, let's just entertain this idea of a gap of the hard problem, and let's actually see where exactly we can get as close as possible, and really pointing out where we should be paying attention to as science kind of develops in this area. And then along the way, we're pointing out logical arguments that make it so that we could still obviously let the possibility that science could close this gap. Whereas it seems like a lot of people say science can't close this gap. I solved consciousness. You don't understand yeah, the second one wouldn't work as well, just based on what's in the script. But the first one is pretty crazy, and it would also be like a little too clickbaity in the sense that it would be a lie. Like the whole point of it is going to be, this is where we should be looking in terms of science that comes out. So, but that's pretty. I like that though. Like I think that's pretty close to what we want to try to get. I mean, we could, you know what, we could argue that we're saying we solved consciousness in like a, in a semantic sense. Not that we've figured it all out, but that we've figured out how we're going to figure it out, essentially. All right, what's going on here? We need to get started. We need to get started. There we go. Boom. And let's have a ChatGPT ready to go, just in case we have questions. All right, The World in Mind, an in-depth analysis of Bernardo Okay, how do we pronounce Kastrup here? Pronounce Bernard Kastrup. I'm guessing that I'm saying it right, but who knows?
Bernardo Kastrup. Bernardo Kastrup.
Why is it kind of lingering or going away at the end there?
Bernardo Kastrup.
Bernardo Kastrup.
Okay, that's pretty.
Bernardo Kastrup.
I don't know. These are a little different. All right, in-depth analysis of Bernardo Kastrup and the Renaissance of analytic idealism. Let's get into it. Introduction. This report provides a comprehensive critical analysis of Bernardo Kastrup, a Dutch philosopher and computer scientist who has emerged as a leading and highly polemical, expressing or constituting a strong critical attack on or controversial opinion about someone or something. Polemical voice in the modern revival of metaphysical idealism. The analysis frames Kastrup through the lens of a central paradox that defines his intellectual project. His strategic use of unimpeachable credentials as a scientific insider to legitimize his position as a philosophical outsider, mounting a systematic challenge to the materialist foundations of the modern scientific worldview. Wow. Strategic use. How is Gemini getting all this? Pointing out a strategic use of his credentials. Unimpeachable, 2 PhDs. That's pretty crazy. As a scientific insider. All right. All to challenge the materialist foundations of the modern scientific worldview. These are the foundations that we are firmly trying to defend. So we've got a clash. With a background encompassing high energy physics at CERN, corporate research at Philips, and high-tech entrepreneurship, Kastrup presents a figure who cannot be easily dismissed as scientifically illiterate. This very background forms the rhetorical foundation of his work, allowing him to argue not that his philosophy is an alternative to science, but that it represents the next logical step in its evolution, the contours of the next mainstream scientific worldview. This approach is not merely a biographical curiosity, it is a deliberate strategy. By positioning himself as a former practitioner who has seen the limits of the materialist paradigm from within, he gains a unique form of authority. He claims that the empirical data itself, when interpreted without the dogmatic assumption of materialism, points inexorably toward a mind-first ontology. Okay. I agree with this. I like a mind-first ontology. The objective of this report is to dissect this ontology, known as analytic idealism, in its entirety. It will evaluate the scientific and philosophical arguments he marshals in its defense, situate his work within the broader intellectual landscape of contemporary philosophy and science, and provide a balanced assessment of its critical reception and its profound implications for our understanding of reality, consciousness, and the human condition. Okay, Let's learn something about Kastrup here, the architect of analytical idealism, biography, and intellectual formation. All right, we're going to trace Bernardo Kastrup's intellectual journey, demonstrating how his unique dual-path career in both hard science and philosophy was not a divergence, but a convergence, culminating in his unified idealist worldview. His trajectory from designing computer processors to constructing the nature of reality is foundational to understanding the substance and style of his arguments. The one thing that's a little bit of a yellow flag is that I don't know if being a physicist really helps you out in this philosophical discussion. Like, I'm really looking for, like, not even just like biologists. Like, we're looking for people that are studying biology at a higher level usually. I mean, I guess the biologist can get into the nitty gritty and see what's going on and why it's going on. Obviously, Damasio would say we want the biologist, but what's my opinion on the quote? The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. I agree with the first part. I think that's what I try to point out in the document, that, you know, the philosophers as well as everyone only interprets the world. Like, you know, everything that a philosopher puts forward is like an interpretive framework. The point, though, is to change it is a little like, that's a little I forget what the word is. Trite? Is that the word? Trite? I guess so. Kind of cliched. Yeah, like when we're talking about changing the world, we're talking about a different thing than this first part. Like, certainly by even having an interpretation, not only are you changing your own interpretation at every moment, but if you were to ever communicate that to other people, you are by definition, or not by definition, but you are changing their interpretation, not necessarily towards yours, but you're changing it in some way. I mean, that's one way we can interpret what's going on. Like, we're just interpreting interpretations and what that does. But yeah, I don't know what the point is, to change it. I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know what's going on here. Whose quote is that, by the way? I think pragmatically we could say that all philosophers have interpreted the world in order to change the world, in order to change other people's minds about how they interpret the world. So I'm giving Marx a 2 out of 5 for that one. Two out of 5 penguins. All right. From Silicon to Psyche. Yeah. So, and not only what I said about, you know, I would trust someone coming from biology and neuroscience and the like cognitive science more so than a physicist or a computer scientist. But not only that, but what, you know, the embodied cognitions point out is that someone coming from computer science or robotics, actually, you know, it depends what time robotics we're talking about. They might have a jaded, maybe not jaded, but like a faulty view of neuroscience or cognition in general. Like, they might believe that what's happening is computational, merely computational. Whereas we now know that there's actually a lot going on. Like, not only are we talking the neural networks, but all the chemistry that surrounds those neural networks. And then also the fact that these neural networks, which are also quite different depending on where we are in the brain, obviously extend throughout our body, coordinating with non-neural systems throughout the body. Like, this isn't just a computer. Like, the computers are like, all computation within a computer is all in the same, and it's actually quite You funnel it literally into your CPUs. So you know it's all just doing like the same operations. Whereas, in the brain and the body, we've got a vast array of different types of processes that are happening. And we can attribute that to our incredibly complex genome as it's instructing cells to build all kinds of stuff. So all right, let's see then. Kastrup's intellectual formation was marked from an early age by a dual fascination with the tangible world of electronics and the abstract world of philosophy. He describes himself as having been born a philosopher, spontaneously wondering about the nature of life and reality from childhood. This innate disposition was coupled with a practical, hands-on exposure to technology from his father, an electronics hobbyist, which placed him at the forefront of the home computer revolution of the late 1970s and early 1980s. This duality is reflected in his formal education, which culminated in two doctorates, a PhD in computer engineering with a focus on reconfigurable computing and artificial intelligence, and a second PhD in philosophy. So yeah, I mean, this is also like not only what I just said, but the fact that he was specifically in computer engineering and AI at this is probably 20 years ago or something. So this is not when they've incorporated this embodied viewpoint into AI yet. This is, I'm kind of speculating on that because I know there were like human computer interactions did kind of start thinking about the world through the developments from neuroscience. Is Kastrup a liberal? Oh, is that not in the digest here? I'm not sure. This rigorous cross-disciplinary training provided him with both the technical language of modern science and the conceptual toolkit of analytic philosophy, a combination that would become the hallmark of his later work. Regardless of what I'm saying, though, this is incredibly impressive, obviously. Scientist at the frontiers. Before becoming a public philosopher, Kastrup built a distinguished career within the very scientific materialist establishment he would later critique. This period is crucial as it provides the experiential basis for his claim to be an insider who knows the system's limitations firsthand. Okay, is this an insider into materialist science or an insider into materialism itself? Like, knows the systems, like what system are we talking about? Are we talking about the system of science, which, perhaps the system of science, of materialist science, is corrupt, but that doesn't lend anything to the credence of the materialist argument. His professional life began at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, working on the Large Hadron Collider, a position he described as a childhood dream come true. He also worked as a scientist at the Phillips Research Laboratories, a historic site of discovery in quantum field theory. Amazing. Beyond institutional research, Kastrup demonstrated significant acumen in the high-tech industry. He founded a parallel processor company called Silicon Hive, which was successful enough to be acquired by Intel in 2011. He also served as a technology strategist for ASML, a geopolitically significant company at the heart of the semiconductor industry. This extensive experience in applied science and corporate technology is not incidental to his philosophical project. It establishes his credentials as someone who has operated at the highest levels of the materialist paradigm. Once again, this is at the highest level of the scientific community that deals with the physical world, you could say, and the understanding or the highlighting or the priority giving of the physical world, creating tangible, functional technology based on its principles All right, this background lends significant weight to his later arguments as they come not from an external critic, but from a seasoned practitioner. All right. What do we got here? We've got BernardoKastrup.com. Oh, is this just the website? Or oh no, that we're going to raving materialists and their nonsense. When was this written? Because we've got the we kind of want to go in order maybe after where we have this, right? Yeah, we already have this one up. 2014. Okay, so that might be around the same time that the video came out. So we'll probably watch the video on it. You're not going to believe this. You remember that guy who made a blog post about Ammon something? Oh no. Oh no. Is this guy... yeah, what was his name? It was Ammon Hillman? Was that it? Yeah, the chemical muse. What's the connection though? Oh, is this his writing? Is this Hillman's writing? Richard Carrier. Is this an Ammon Hillman satellite account of some sort? All right. We might be able to get to this. 2024. This is kind of new though. Uh-oh. Archives. Is not telling you the truth. The Gospels do not describe pedophilia, and no one was getting... we saw this, right? We did see this. But who's the author here? Richard Carrier. Okay, so Richard Carrier has just covered both of them, right? This one a little more recently. All right, new goal. We got to get on the Richard Carrier site. We need to get our own... it's the same guy, yeah. We need to get our own blog entry. All right, the philosophical turn. The pivotal shift in Kastrup's thinking from a practitioner within the materialist framework to its most articulate contemporary critic was catalyzed. I didn't know that you could say catalyzed. By a direct encounter with the philosophical problem of consciousness. All right. Here we are. He recounts reading the work of philosopher David Chalmers, who famously articulated the hard problem of consciousness. The problem highlights the explanatory gap between the physical and the mental. There's nothing in the quantitative third-person language of physics that can explain the qualitative first-person nature of subjective experience or what it feels like to have a particular sensation. All right. For Kastrup, this was not just a puzzle to be solved, but a sign of a fundamental flaw in the underlying metaphysical assumption. Uh-oh. He concluded that materialism was not merely incomplete, but incoherent. The core promise of materialism, that consciousness is somehow generated by non-conscious material arrangements, was, in his view, the wrong turn that leads to insoluble contradictions and paradoxes. So, the one thing I don't understand is the difference in argument between this, that consciousness is somehow generated by non-conscious material arrangements. I guess it's analogous to the argument that life itself, like organisms, is composed of non-living parts. Like I guess I don't understand what's the difference in the mystery there. I wonder if that's something we should look into. What's the difference? Actually, I should say, for the idealist, what's the difference between the argument that that the premise that consciousness is somehow generated by non-conscious is incoherent. This is a terrible question / sentence here, but which leads to insoluble contradictions and paradoxes. What's the difference between that? Let me do this. Just A and B. The argument. Oh, difference between the argument that A. The premise is somehow okay, and B, the premise that life, for example, organisms, is somehow generated by non-conscious material arrangements is incoherent and leads to. Actually, I'll just leave it there. I'm guessing it has to. The problem is we're gonna end up in like a semantic puzzle. I don't know. We have to end up somewhere where someone has to make a semantic like mistake or like a not a faux pas, but doing something inappropriate in terms of semantics or language. So is Bernardo Kastrup saying the only thing that exists is some metaphysical notion of consciousness? I don't know. I guess we have to get there. So far, we just think that, or all we know now is that he finds the materialist view incoherent. But I'm trying to understand this. This isn't like something. This isn't really a counter to him. I'm just trying to figure out this argument because it presses on a deep distinction within idealist reasoning between consciousness as the condition of experience and life as an empirical phenomenon. Within experience, here's the breakdown. The consciousness argument is ontological and transcendental. When idealists say that the premise consciousness is generated by non-conscious matter is incoherent, the argument is usually transcendental, not empirical. So consciousness, by definition, is the condition of all appearances, including the appearance of matter itself. To claim that consciousness is generated by matter, therefore, reverses the order of dependence. Yes, so I think what happens here is there's too much credence given to the materialist viewpoint here, like to science, and this is the problem that Sam Harris as a true prominent materialist or physicalist gets everyone in trouble with. Because he will hold that there is truth, and the truth is this objective view of the material world. When really, ontologically, our understanding of the physical world, we could understand it as something that is like transcendent or non-psychological, such that if we weren't here to experience it, it would still be there. But that's like a property of this concept that we have. So we're still like leveraging ontology, which is mind dependent. Granted, we can pragmatically act out the conceptual rules of that property, such that I will believe that when I walk out of the room, like everything stays here, even though I'm not perceiving it, and I will pragmatically act as if everything that's physical in the world is physical, regardless of whether anyone's perceiving it, etc. But once again, like the concept, the experience concept, whatever we want to think about is an experience concept, whether that's me explicitly thinking about that meaning, putting it into words, or if it's me acting out and perceiving things without having to actually explicitly, consider what I'm perceiving. Like that's still something that's like subjective, that's acted out through experience. And comes into consciousness in different ways. And we could consider how it goes into consciousness in these different ways. But yeah, ontology is very much mind dependent. almost all abstract philosophy is semantics. Right. But yeah, so this is the semantic difficulty here. Like the idealist is going to point out that, hey, the materialist believes that the material world is the truth, and that gets them into trouble. And I do think it gets them into trouble. I think that's a good point. But I would say that this is inappropriate in a Steelman version. Consciousness is like, it's not like the concept of consciousness isn't generated by matter. It's not the appearance of consciousness that's generated by matter. Like the concept of consciousness and the appearance of consciousness is generated by consciousness. And in consciousness, we can reflect upon a concept of the physical world that by property, or by its very property, is what allows consciousness to be. But not to be in like an ontological sense, but to be in a very empirical sense. So it's like two different modes of looking at the world, and you could argue like what is takes priority, whatever that means. And this is like the Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, which is embedded in the other, and it's a very silly argument because you're having two different arguments. Okay. Two philosophers will never argue with how to define consciousness. Never agree. What is justice? Oh, won't anyone tell me, please? I don't know, Socrates, but you'll find out if you don't stop corrupting the youth. Wow. That's pretty rough. But even then, what did he get justice? You know, that's obviously semantically ambiguous. All right, okay, so do we have to keep going? It treats what is constituted within experience as the cause of the very conditioning of experience, right? Form of contradiction. It's not that there's an actual factual inconsistency, but that the claim undermines its own intelligibility. Yeah, the claim only undermines its own intelligibility if you infer the meaning of the claim to be such that there would be a contradiction. And I'm trying to argue that you can infer a meaning of this claim that does not involve the contradiction, but it does involve very tedious nuance that I have to keep saying because it's very important. I can at least respect the Greeks for trying to practically apply whatever they're talking of. Yeah. I don't know if that's the most pragmatic strategy, but it is respectable. Or at least analyzing the practicality of applying their ideas. Yeah. Yeah, you just don't want to. You don't want to apply your ideas to your own unnecessary demise. And when I say that, it's really like a consequentialist argument of like, if you weren't to force your demise here and be a martyr of these ideas, then perhaps you could affect a better outcome throughout your entire life. Granted, some people believe that being the martyr does transcend anything else they could possibly do in their life. But I don't think I am convinced of that. So the life argument, empirical and metaphysical, not transcendental. Right. Okay. So this is fine. That's all right. We can jump out of this. Let's get a second one ready to go. The core premise of materialism, that consciousness is somehow generated by non-conscious material arrangements, was, in his view, the wrong turn that leads to insoluble contradictions and paradoxes. So, yeah, if I were to talk to Bernardo, I would say exactly what I just said here. What do you think about applying conservation of energy to consciousness? Applying conservation of energy to consciousness. I guess in what sense? Okay, conservation of energy. So obviously we talk about the free energy principle in the document. Like energy never being created or destroyed. So I don't know if that would make sense to talk about in consciousness. I mean, granted, it's obviously being applied, like the whole idea of these universal laws is that they're applied everywhere. But to leverage that type of interpretation of the physical world's laws and then to apply that to consciousness, I think would be inappropriate. Like, I think you're talking about two different layers of abstraction here. Like one's, yeah, like they're quite different. Now you can talk about the free energy principle, so that you could talk about this like when looking at consciousness or homeostasis, predictive processing. Like there's this idea that our brains have naturally evolved to try to minimize energy. So it's not, it's not the same thing as the conservation of energy here, but it's a minimizing of energy use. So it's conserving energy in that sense, but those are different ideas. Like those are different concepts at different levels of abstraction. Right. Yeah. Obviously, conservation of energy is being applied at the most material level of the brain, and we're talking about the. What do we got here? Consciousness. Oh. Consciousness cannot have evolved. Oh no. Oh no. Who's writing? Oh, this is Bernardo. All right, this is gonna be late game stuff, late game material. Let's get to let's actually get to the foundation of his stuff before we get into the nitty gritty here. Yo, we got oh my gosh, this is like maybe our first YouTube chat. Thomas Lodger is welcome. That's so exciting. It seems similar to Advaitic ideas of awareness being eternal and indestructible. Yes, so I would first say, like, what more precisely does eternal and indestructible mean when we're talking about awareness? And then I would also say that we're at that, like, when we're talking about awareness being eternal and indestructible, it's not that I'm like, against entertaining those words to describe it. I think that's just a different level of abstraction than when we're talking about conservation of energy, which is it's like a discussion within the physical space. Sorry, I didn't mean to send that. No, you're good. You're good. Feel free to send as much or as little as you'd like. Thomas can see us. Thomas can see, and Thomas sees Twitch and then at your name and then your text, all coming from ReStreamBot. I do have a question. Do you think we are? I don't know if that's the whole question, but do you think we are? It's kind of an ontological question. But I'm gonna wait until if I were to answer that question, I'm guessing there's more to that. But if I were to answer that question, I would say that it's rather ambiguous as to what we mean when we say like we are. I hate my phone. Do you think energy isn't appropriate to apply to consciousness? Well, when we're talking about energy, we're talking about a different thing. When we're talking about consciousness versus when we're talking about like the laws of physics. So like the word energy, as we colloquially use it, is such that we can actually apply it to both of these things, but we're going to infer different things from these different ways that we're using, like these two different contexts. And I would argue that we should be careful not to try to say or think that they're the same thing. Like when someone walks in a room and I say they have a hot positive energy, I'm not going to think that that's the same thing as, the energy that's keeping atoms together. You know, I think that would be inappropriate. But I do think that energy is an appropriate word to use to apply to consciousness because it's rather intuitive, and you could probably, communicate something effectively that way. But you want to be precise. You want to, like, when you're talking about energy and consciousness, you want to be precise about what you actually mean. Do you think we see the world as it is, or as a representation form what our brain filters? So more so the second one, but not exactly the way that the second one's phrased. It's so like the more recent science shows to us that it's not like our brain is like just generating a representation, and like when I see like a pen, it's not like the same representation is there across time. We can more so think about it that at every moment the activity in our brain is like firing off a representation, but because our brain and body is constantly changing, as well as, you could think of like your memory, what you understand, how you see the world, etc., how you feel. All these things are affecting the way that we actually see the meaning. So the representation of this pen, I would say, if I were to use that terminology, is actually changing every time, like all the time. So I wouldn't say that this is the same representation over time. Even though it feels that way. It feels like when I look at this pen for 10 seconds, it feels like the representation of a pen is the same. But like, it would be most appropriate to say that we're really, experience, like our experience is a product of very much dynamic activity. Based on what you're asking, though, it's more so the second one. It's certainly that we're not seeing the world directly, and we got a nice subsection on that very topic in the document here. So in part one, actually, we kind of start off with this stuff. We've got this nice subsection. We don't experience the physical world directly. Brain is not a passive recorder of information. It actively processes sensory input to construct a cohesive and meaningful representation of the world. So you know what? I literally just said all that stuff that's more precise. I think we get away with this way of talking about how we see the world early in the document. Like, this is like our introduction, essentially. But this is like, I would say, like, the most contemporary neuroscientists would even say that this is not an appropriate way to say it. But this is basically what you asked, and this is the second option. The representation is not the physical world itself. We can more accurately understand it as a mental model shaped by the brain. So yeah, in some interpretation, we could think about what we're seeing as a model, as a predictive model too. It's not like we're seeing. That's the other thing that existential phenomenological philosophy shows us, as well as neuroscience. It's not that it's almost as if I'm not even seeing what is currently the case. Like, my mind is giving me what it predicts. So it's giving me what it expects these objects to be. And that's how we can make sense of the fact that, like, we don't pay attention to every single detail equally when we're scanning a room, where we're seeing things that either like make sense to us or are particularly striking because they don't make sense to us, because we didn't expect it to be that way. And usually the stuff that we don't really care about, like just random details on your wall or whatnot, like that stuff just goes, like, that's hidden from your conscious view when you're not specifically paying attention to it. I think can be insightful to draw parallels from other aspects of reality. I would say, though, like, this is a similar argument that I want to make with the whole consciousness stuff. It's like, according to the standards of science, that would be inappropriate. Like, it would be scientifically inappropriate for you to say that the same energy that's being conserved in those equations that I just showed you is the same energy that I feel when I feel that consciousness is giving me a positive or negative energies or energies from the universe, etc. Like that would just be by the standards of science, like that have been developed over time. That would be inappropriate. Someone wrote a blog post against Kastrup's consciousness article. Oh my gosh, we're so behind. Why evolution is true. What? Why evolution is true.com? Where are you finding these? Onion Helmet? Faith first fact. Oh my gosh. This is insane. Should we go down this whole... I don't think we have enough time to go down this whole arc. All right, so this one we don't have to read because we're going to watch the video on this, I think. Or maybe this is a... Yeah, this is a interview about this, I'm guessing. So I think we don't have to watch this, but... Bernardo's attempt to bootstrap idealism. We probably don't have to read this because we're going to get all the contents from here, but maybe we read this. We don't have to read the Am and Helmet one, but I think we want to go in this order. But we do need to we need to finish this reading. But let's catch up on the chat here. There's a lot to unpack here. One, if what we see are only representations, then the brain itself and the dynamic activity that it causes are also representations of the world. We are not looking at the brain itself, but a representation. Something must then exist prior to said representation. So yeah, like this is so I don't think it becomes circular, but I do believe that this is the difficulty. When we're thinking about the brain, like that is a representation. Like concepts, even abstract concepts of numbers or of love or anything, like those are representations if we're going to use representations this way. So when we're thinking about the brain, even if we're looking at the brain, we're not seeing the brain. Like this isn't the brain itself. These are representations of the brain. So yeah, I don't know when you hopped in, but the point I'm trying to make here is that, like, ontologically speaking, like consciousness has priority. Like all of these meanings and stuff, anything we know about the physical world, it's being disclosed to us through consciousness. Like any meaning that we know, that we can think that we know, that we think that we understand, etc., that's all being revealed to us through consciousness. So I like to say that we each have a subjective experience of an objective world. And what I try to point out there is that it does feel like the things that we have representations of are true in some like objective transcendent sense. Like it does feel like when I say that this is a pen, that like that's a true statement about the world. But really, it's an experience. It's a feeling of certainty that I feel about that fact that I just said, etc. So yeah, there's no, yeah. How do I get to the circle here? Because at that point there's no circular conflict or contradiction. The issue is that we're trying to conceptualize what is actually connecting physical stuff, which we're literally just conceptualizing. It's like we don't experience atoms, and we don't experience neurons or neural connections. What we experience is a concept of neural connections that by property it creates consciousness. Like that's the conceptualization that we make about these concepts. Like this is all happening in this conceptual space. It's not like we experience the... I don't know. I think I'm just going in circles now. Yeah, if that wasn't sufficient or accessible enough, please let me know, and and we can hone in. I think maybe you read more into me just drawing parallels. Yeah, it's just that if you make an analogy, I think with anything, you just need to be really precise about what the similarity you're trying to point out actually is. Because when you make analogies, it can lead to people inferring more about the similarities or more similarities than what you might intend or what might be appropriate to make or say or think, depending on how we talk about rules and stuff. Here's another philosopher who's wrecked himself on the shoals of reason and logic while trying to deal with consciousness. Oh my gosh, what a beginning. Was that in that article? Oh my gosh. All right, we have to read that eventually. Okay. This was not a puzzle to be solved, but a sign of a fundamental flaw in the underlying metaphysical assumption. He concluded that materialism was not merely incomplete, but incoherent. Okay, so we did read all that. This realization prompted a systematic re-evaluation of his worldview. He began to search for an alternative metaphysical foundation, one that did not create the hard problem in the first place. This search led him to reverse the materialist assumption, proposing instead that consciousness is primary and that the physical world arises from it, a position he would develop into the sophisticated system of analytic idealism. Yeah, so along the same discussion that I was just making, I would say that this is not an appropriate position because I would stipulate that the concepts of the physical world, of atoms, of energy, etc., do arise from consciousness, but those concepts are such that they have the properties, the conceptual properties, that they are what generates consciousness. But that's not to say that consciousness arises from the concepts. So like that's the distinction that allows this whole thing to work. So it's this is why in our document we kind of go into a view about how we can think about concepts as like this level of interpretation on what we understand and what we experience, the meaning we experience. But at the end of the day, this entire thing is all within the lens of consciousness. Like this is a phenomenological ontology, an existential phenomenology. One of those, or both of those. Anyone here work in the Amazon corporate departments? I do not. So you believe in universals. How do you get a particular? Atoms, sine waves, etc., non-consciousness entities to universals. This is fun. You know what? This is fun. Here we go. Let's let this. Let's try this out. Let's throw the document in here. What does this document say about universals and particulars? If we merely think about, I'll just go with that. All right, I'll give you the answer first. That the very concepts of universals and particulars, first of all, are like dependent on each other, like they're related to each other. Like we wouldn't be able to understand what a universal is without understanding what a particular is, and vice versa. And so then I could think that, like my understanding of what a pen is requires that I understand that there could be a singular pen, and similarly, vice versa. For me to think that this is a pen, I must presuppose that there exists a universal that is a pen. So like these are still in the conceptual space, like related very, very highly. I don't believe that a particular is like a physical thing. Like a particular is a concept, and a particular pen is a concept, and a universal is a concept. These are all conceptual. They're conceptually related. We experience them through experience, through consciousness, as concepts. And yeah, concepts. Just to give some background on the document, it's not simply just like what we think about and articulate in words when we reflect on something. Oh my gosh, look at that! Is that a hand wave? That was so cool. Peter Introvert, how's it going? Welcome. Okay, what was the second question? Also, I can't tell if you're a weak emergence or a strong emergence guy. Oh. So first of all, I don't know if, even though I say we for all these things, I don't want to speak for anyone else in this chat. Does the document push weak or strong emergence? All right. Based on the document provided, here's what it says about universals and particulars. Particulars are the specific individual instances we encounter, like this specific cat, that particular chair, while universals represent the general categories, qualities, or kinds these instances belong to. Co-constitutive relationship. Universals and particulars are described as reciprocal and co-constitutive. This means you cannot grasp a universal without understanding the possibility of particulars related to it and vice versa. Each derives its determinate meaning through this fundamental relationship. Identifying a specific particular, for example, this is a cat, involves leveraging an implicit relation connecting it to the universal concept cat, which gives the particular the necessary features and implications associated with that universal. So just to give some context, like when we're talking about concepts here, this is the part of the document where we're trying to just conceptualize what is our understanding. So that's not to say that this like way of talking about these things like concepts is the right way, like that concepts are some truism about the world, like objectively. It's that I find that concepts, and I'm like leveraging this from Hegel and Brandom, I think this way of talking about these things, like this interpretive lens, is really effective when we're trying to consider, like, what is it do we implicitly understand about the world? So, like, when I say that this is a pen, or I see this and I think, oh, that's a pen, or I use this as a pen, what must I understand implicitly in that very action? And it might be, I understand that this is a writing utensil. I understand that this is, something I can hold and use. This is something that can, run out of ink. Like all of these you could think about are properties. You could think that they are implicit things that we understand. When reality, like if we were really to go down to the neuroscience behind this, it's not that we have to think these properties when we're like using them. And it's not even that these properties are like engaged. Like, when I talk about properties or any meaning that we experience, we're talking about activations in the brain. Like a lot of this stuff is just like habitualized motor movements and habitualized thought patterns. So yeah, this is like, talking about concepts is a different level of abstraction than what's actually going on underneath. And we try to connect those, but we get to the conceptual space so that we could start talking about philosophy. And we could start talking about what it would mean for us to be able to do something or to know something or to, have freedom in the world, which is what we're really trying to get to at the end of this part one. What is the dynamic nature? So this is the cool thing. As our brains changing, universals and particulars evolve in tandem as understanding changes through experience. Learning more about a specific particular instance, like a wobbly chair, can shift one's understanding of related universal categories, like chairs or sturdy chairs, and conversely, an expanded grasp of a universal gives new meaning to its particulars. So if I watch a video and I see that someone's like, hey, this is a cool trick you could do with a pen, you could twist in your fingers this way, then now I know something new about this particular pen. I can twist this thing in my fingers in a certain way. And when I see a little cool detail on this pen, I now know that pens, the universal of pens can have these types of cool details, because this one does. And now I know that pens can have, like, it's possible that a pen could be that way. Okay. And then to answer your question, based on the provided document, appears to push for a view consistent with weak emergence rather than strong emergence. I don't know what weak emergence and strong emergence means, but that's what it pushes, I guess. Just read, they're cutting 30,000 corporate jobs. Jeez, that's right. You were planning on giving me that bad news right here? Yo, Peter Introvert, how's it going? They're all connected and exist through conceptual experience. Sounds like an idealist thing to say. Yep. But I have to work soon, sadly. Aw, man. Also, using an idealist like Hegel for your worldview is interesting. Yeah, this is why I think our point of view here is particularly interesting, because we're going as deep as pointing out the primacy, the ontological primacy of consciousness, but we're able to still live with the physical world in a way that doesn't point out that the physical world is like some objective truth that as it relates to existential ontology or phenomenology. Thanks for being so open and nice with the discussion. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for providing the discussion and the questions. Peter Introvert, what's good? I'm learning Deleuze, and philosophy, according to him, is about creating concepts. But it does sound like you're reaching idealist conclusions somehow while also believing in materialism. Yep. But to answer any question, we need a framework where answers can have any meaning, right? Meanings aren't fixed. Absolutely. That's what I believe. Now, I make sense of that through the fact that our brain is constantly changing. And we could see, we go into deep discussions about neuroplasticity itself to point out what is happening when we even think about things. Like when I think about a pen, the activations in my brain necessarily change how I think about a pen the second later, the next moment, even though it feels the same, because the connections aren't, like, pragmatically aren't changing in a significant way such that it manifests to me in my consciousness as something that has changed. But to answer, okay, meanings are okay. All right, yeah. Let's look at what is going on with the weak emergence stuff. Physicalist, materialist foundations. The document starts by grounding its framework in a physical understanding of the world, where the universe is composed of matter and energy governed by consistent laws. Now, it is like, what I'm trying to get at is my conceptual understanding of the physical world is such that these are properties of it. Like, these are conceptual properties. All of this is still being experienced in my mind. It explicitly states that thoughts, emotions, and decisions arise from neural activity following these physical laws. This aligns with weak emergence, where higher level properties arise from and are ultimately dependent on lower level physical interactions. Mechanistic explanations. Concepts like embodied cognition and predictive processing are used extensively to explain how subjective experiences like meaning and perception arise from complex interactions between the brain, body, and environment. These are mechanistic accounts explaining higher level phenomena in terms of the interactions of lower level components, which is characteristic of weak emergence. Compatibilism. The document explicitly aims for and adopts a compatibilist stance on freedom and determinism. It frames the felt sense of freedom as an emergent capacity that arises from the deterministic machinery of the brain and body. This view treats freedom as a real experience property, so freedom is a real experience conceptual property. Not only can I think about freedom as a concept separate from myself, but I could think about what I can do. Like, I can think about what I, as an agent, am able to do. So this is like afforded to me by my understanding. Granted, even though I understand that this experience that I'm having right now as I reflect on these things is a result of underlying physical processes, this experience that I have is very much conscious. This is where the meaning is arising and being disclosed. This view treats freedom as a real experience property generated by underlying physical processes consistent with weak emergence rather than a fundamentally new causal power independent of those processes, which strong emergence might imply. So handling the hard problems. So this is what we don't do effectively in the document. And I don't think we actually need to. I think that's going to be something I argue in this next video I make. But in the next video I make, we are going to look at how close we can get to filling in the hard problem that we possibly can using neural correlates. And I think we can get pretty close. But perhaps that was that's also inappropriate to say, because I think people think of this as asymptotic, where regardless of how close you get, you're not actually there because you're never actually able to get the full explanation. But I think this is where this view of concepts itself, this like view of ontology, kind of lends itself to the consciousness discussion, because we can only think about and experience consciousness as a subject or as a topic through some conceptual understanding that is where we presuppose things about consciousness. So we presuppose that we are some subject and we're experiencing things that are objective, and that things that are objective might include the brain. And despite the fact that the brain might create consciousness, there's still a gap between that. You know, these are all things that our conceptual understanding allows us to think. There is so much to talk about. Oh yeah, absolutely. Weak emergence is the belief that consciousness is not a new ontological category, but a sum of non-conscious material. This falls victim to the hard problem. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious what this says, and then I'll try to touch on the hard problem in a second. All right, while acknowledging the hard problem of consciousness, the difficulty in explaining how physical processes give rise to subjective experience, the document frames it as a current limitation of understanding or an explanatory gap rather than definitive proof of strong ontological emergence, that consciousness is fundamentally irreducible to physical processes. Okay. I mean, that's kind of fine. Yeah, I think we know enough about neural correlates that we know that the things that we experience, like the concepts we experience, are very much affected by the physical mechanisms underneath. Now, the hard problem still points out that the thing that actually makes us conscious is not fully accounted for in those underlying neural correlates. That said, it doesn't necessarily mean that neural correlates can't make sense of that. It just points out that we don't have that current understanding. But more importantly, it doesn't get in our practical direction here, where we're pointing out that the things that we do experience, the understandings we do have, are very much correlated with what's going on in the brain. And not just to say that it correlates with activity, but like we could literally point out the different brain regions that are associated with different types of processing, etc. Like science is getting to the point where we're literally pointing out the parts of the brain and the very patterns of activity that arise when we think about certain things. So that's all to say that we know enough to know that there is something physical that's very much involved. But yeah, the hard problem, it points out that discussion of what's that last bit of magic that makes it feel subjective or have that same feeling that we have is like the last bit that we're looking for. But the one thing that this document pushes for is that the feeling that we have at every single moment, not just the meaning we experience or the factual things we see, but the very experience, like the feeling that this is true, the feeling of, you know, just all kinds of emotions, or feeling of hunger, feeling of everything, etc. The feeling of the fact that being in a good mood makes you see more opportunities or affordances in the environment. Like it's just pointing out that so much of our conscious experience is affected by these underlying processes that we can practically speaking move forward knowing that and operate in a productive way, which, you know, we in part one of this document, we consider how we can think about our freedoms such that we can go and do stuff to go and pursue goals. And that's all what we really need to do in part one. We have to understand the nature of our experience and our understanding and what it would mean for us to do stuff in that world that we understand. And then we could get to the more practical, like, how do we actually identify and pursue our goals in part two. But yeah, we really don't need to solve the consciousness problem, like the hard problem of consciousness, in order to complete our task of understanding the world and our freedom within it. But that does require us to have a ontology that involves consciousness. All right, correlation doesn't equal causation. If it did, we would link ice cream sales with crime in the summer, and we would say radios produce songs, not receive them. I agree. That's the point I'm trying to make, where we have very strong correlations. That doesn't mean causation. We don't. The point I'm trying to make is we don't need to know the actual causation to leverage what we know about those correlations. Like, what we know about those correlations is so huge that like we have enough. We have enough to move forward here. As far as I'm concerned, this hard problem, figuring out the hard problem to its like to its, you know, to the very end, is just interesting. You know, it's cool. Like, it's fun, it's cool, but it's not necessary in order to actually move forward here. And I also am going to point out logical fallacies, or maybe, we're going to point out some logical fallacies, but I think that it's inappropriate scientifically to say that, or to fill in that gap with something specific that's external, to like say that what's actually causing consciousness, like, I think it would be inappropriate to say that it's plausible that what's causing consciousness is actually something external in the universe, or that it's the universe, or that it's, you know, proto-consciousness. Proto-consciousness is actually like a much more plausible idea than universal consciousness. Because proto-consciousness, the idea that there's a little bit of consciousness in matter, can now maybe make sense of where, like, we don't know where where the exact causation arises in neural correlates, or when I say, like, in the neurological mechanisms that actually, you know, affect consciousness. So in theory, maybe there's just something we haven't seen yet that makes sense of how consciousness could just be in matter. But actually, you know what? In the video that I'm about to point out, I'm gonna point out that it would be inappropriate to think that it's plausible for consciousness to be in matter. It's really that consciousness most likely is in the activation itself. So it's in it's in energy, pretty much. Like, going back to what Dom was saying, but I'm not trying to connect the two dots, but it's literally in the energy of activation. That's where we can think that proto-consciousness would be, but we just don't understand how that equals or makes sense of this experience. We'll get into it. I'll write it in a way that reads well in that video. Okay, I'm behind though. I apologize. The title of the stream is Bernardo Kastrup. Yeah, that's what we were trying. Is it just Bernardo? We are slowly reading through this Bernardo Kastrup by it's kind of a biography. It's a biography / what he, like, the idealism that he's into. And then we've got a few articles that I was hoping to read on that very topic. Chances are we're not going to get to it all by the end of the day, and I'm going to continue tomorrow rather than talk about what I think I had slated, which was that book, The Strange Order of Things. I think we're going to just do more Bernardo tomorrow, honestly. So yeah, let's actually just, I don't know if anyone actually uses this calendar rather than the pictures, but there we go. We got Bernardo Kastrup, 2 days in a row, part 2. And then Wednesday's topic is non-negotiable. We have to continue working on part 2 of the document. We have to keep the document progression or progress going. Okay, let me make sure I answer everything. It will affect the sound. We don't use that as evidence for radios producing music rather than it being a receiver of waves. Okay, that's a continuation. Right, yeah, no, I agree with the correlation causation argument. Do we discuss idealism? I think that's what we are discussing today. Got to go to work now. Yeah, talk to you later. Thank you for hopping in. Thanks for the discussion. My last question would be, what exactly is consciousness of its, if it's the sum of its parts? How does subjectivity exist that way? Check out the next video. I will try to cover this as aptly as we possibly can with what we have at our disposal today. That's the goal of this next video. I watched 100 podcasts with him. Nice. Or more. If there's anything that you think is like seminal of his, not only like his lore or his content, let me know, because I'm trying to do a deep dive. All right. All right, let's continue. I think we ended off with me pointing out that this is an inappropriate sentence here. This search led him to reverse the materialist assumption, proposing instead that consciousness is... I don't know. Okay, it was... Where was it, actually? I'm not sure. Let's just start here then. This realization prompted a systematic reevaluation of his worldview. He began to search for an alternative metaphysical foundation, one that did not create the hard problem in the first place. This search led him to reverse the materialist assumption, proposing instead that consciousness is primary and that the physical world arises from it, a position he would develop into the sophisticated system of analytic idealism. Okay, yeah, this is what I pointed out. Yeah, I would say that this is inappropriate. It's inappropriate to say that the physical world arises from consciousness, but it would be very appropriate to say that our concept or our understanding of the physical world certainly does arise from consciousness. But we have an experience or an understanding about something objective that feels objective, as if it's some separate thing, but it's not actually separate from our experience. Like, we're not actually experiencing things that are in the physical world directly. That was the whole point of that previous thing we jumped into. Okay, the world as mental experience, a deep dive into analytic idealism. This section provides a systematic exposition of Bernardo Kastrup's positive philosophical project, analytic idealism. It deconstructs the key components of his ontology, the primacy of consciousness, the concept of a universal mind at large, the metaphor of individual minds as altars, and the status of the physical world as a perceptual dashboard to explain how they form a coherent, albeit radical model of reality. Okay. Yes, so I guess the question would be, how does everyone end up having a similar understanding of the physical world? And I think you would need a mind at large in order to make that connection. Whereas the way that I make that connection is through encounters with social encounters and encounters with the environment, where your understanding of what is the case is changing all the time, and such that, you know, in a social group, we kind of arrive at some equilibrium of meaning or of understanding, such that we don't all understand exactly the same things, but we're within, you could say theoretically, we're within a range where it pragmatically we don't have to we don't have to feel significant negative emotion when we communicate and whatnot. And when people come into a social group and affect significant negative emotion to everyone, then they get in trouble. They get ostracized, or they get, like a few hundred years ago, they just get killed or something. He creates a compelling. Oh, he created a compelling mapping, but he kind of inverse materialism, yet leaves some form of dualism. Okay. Yeah, I think some form of dualism. Yeah, I think we try for something similar. We don't do the inverse materialism in a way. Like we like I think of concepts as rules, as standards, such that, if I say that, or if I, think that this is a pen, I think that it's a rule that when someone sees this, they should understand it as a pen. Like that's almost like a semantic rule. And such that if someone were to, like, if we were to actually talk about play this out pragmatically, if someone were to say, no, that you're wrong, this is a pencil, I'm going to think that this person's messing with me, or I'm going to try to correct them. But regardless, my mind is going to divert my attention to that dissonance, and it's going to affect some discomfort. Now, granted, this is not a big deal, so the salience of this experience is not that high. But yeah, so we could think about meaning as deontic in this sense, like as rule based in this sense, and it's the rules of there's rules of the physical world. The concept of the physical world has rules. Like we've conceptualized those as the laws of physics, such that when these are pragmatic rules about language almost. It's like when someone talks about gravity, there are certain ways they're allowed to talk about gravity. They can't say that gravity is some like a manifestation of aliens, or they're not allowed to say that it's something that's affected by a deity. They're not allowed to say that the Earth has a higher gravity than the sun. Like there's just rules about the way that we talk about these things, and that's all that they are. Like that. This is where we really prioritize the ontology of consciousness. Like these rules are only played out in our minds and in the way we communicate, in our actions, etc. And we negotiate meaning across each other. And when we build up institutions that are so effective, they kind of hold this reliability. So, we create textbooks. People trust textbooks, so when they see a textbook, they know that this is a more reliable piece of truth, quote unquote, than what someone else is telling them. So this is how it plays out in my mind. Mind instead of matter. I'm closer to Don Hoffman, but for him, consciousness is starting point. Bernardo is more religious about it. Okay, I'm interested to hear what Don Hoffman has to say about this stuff. Maybe we can follow up. Let me just make sure I get the name. Don Hoffman. Okay. All right, the primacy of consciousness, which I am actually no, yeah, we can start here. Which I'm totally on board for. The bedrock of analytic idealism is the ontological and epistemological primacy of consciousness. Kastrup's argument begins with a foundational Cartesian-style epistemological premise. The only thing any individual can know with absolute certainty is the existence of their own subjective experience. So I would point out that this is actually also speculative, because we understand our own conscious experience through some understanding, like through some culturally instilled contingent understanding. You know, I understand consciousness to be a certain way. I expect certain things of consciousness. These are things that are from my past, from my memory. These expectations are manifest in ways that my biology contributes to. Yes, so even my own understanding of consciousness, I have to think is slightly speculative, just like every other piece of meaning that I understand. Awesome. Yep. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out who in this field I should be paying a lot of attention to, and who I should, coordinate with or work with, etc. Granted, it would be a really fun conversation to have with Bernardo Kastrup, but I'd have to see how he is in conversations usually. I imagine it would be productive. And yeah, though I don't think it would be as productive as someone who, agreed on this topic. Mainly because I'm pretty confident in this topic, but perhaps I'm wrong. There's always a chance that there's a mind at large. That's the whole. I think what. Yeah, the thing that I'm more confident about is what we ought to be. What we ought to be considering as plausible. So even if you're like, it's like when someone makes a prediction in the moment, like they make a reasoned prediction in the moment, you would say that they're right in doing that, like they're right in the process. They might end up with the wrong answer, but at least they did the thing that they thought was 75%, likely to be correct. Yeah, so even if they were wrong in one way, they might not have been wrong in some other way in terms of the process. Can I summarize my approach again? Gemini can, I think. Based on the provided document, appears to push for a view consistent with. So this is the Stan Richardson document that I gave it. A view consistent with weak emergence rather than strong emergence. Here's why. The document starts by grounding its framework in a physical understanding of the world, where the universe is composed of matter and energy governed by consistent laws. It explicitly states that thoughts, emotions, and decisions arise from neural activity following these physical laws. This aligns with a weak emergence, where high-level properties arise from and are ultimately dependent on lower-level physical or interactions. Mechanistic explanations. So we leverage concepts like embodied cognition and predictive processing to explain how subjective experiences like meaning and perception arise from complex interactions between the brain, body, and environment. These are mechanistic accounts explaining higher level phenomena in terms of the interactions of lower level components, which is characteristic of weak emergence. But, all right, so compatibilism. This document explicitly aims for and adopts a compatibilist stance on freedom and determinism. So this is slightly a different discussion, but it frames the felt sense of freedom as an emergent capacity that arises from the deterministic machinery of the brain and body. So this is kind of pointing out the conceptual nature of freedom. This view treats freedom as a real experience property generated by underlying physical processes consistent with weak emergence, rather than a fundamentally new causal power independent of those processes. Handling the hard problem. While acknowledging the hard problem of consciousness, the difficulty in explaining how physical processes give rise to subjective experience, the document frames it as a current limitation of understanding or an explanatory gap, rather than definitive proof of strong ontological emergence. In other words, that consciousness is fundamentally irreducible to physical processes. Explicit rejection of non-physical influence. In assessing its own framework, the document explicitly states that it precludes the possibility of achieving a transcendent, purely objective view from nowhere. It cannot make claims about supernatural entities that intervene in the physical world, and precludes a magical concept of free will that exists outside the causal nature of our biology. These exclusions strongly reinforce a worldview where complex phenomena emerge from the physical substrate, aligning with weak emergence. I mean, in your own words. Yeah, I mean, I guess it takes a lot to get there, but maybe it doesn't. I think that our experience, I think that our science shows very clearly, or it strongly suggests, you could say. No, I think it's pretty clear that our experience of the world, our conscious experience, is very much affected by physical things, underlying mechanisms. Our experience of the world is not the physical world itself, though. Like when I experience a pen, I don't see like atoms and energy, etc. I don't see photons. What I see in my mind, like what appears to me in my mind, is a pen. Like it's an object. It's we later consider these things as concepts. So yeah, this is also just a advertisement of the document. So throughout part 1 of this document, we kind of point out what is actually affecting our experience in the moment. We point out all the relevant like neural correlates, as well as the leading interpretations of what our mind is actually doing. So predictive processing points out that our mind is always predicting the stimuli that it's receiving. Like it's always predicting what's going to happen in the world, what you're going to see, what you're going to feel. Science shows that we literally predict what like our internal visceral states are going to be. But this is all just affecting the phenomenology of like what we experience, what we see, what. Thank you very much. What we experience. We also, in the document, early on, we do a little bit of phenomenology where we point out that our experience isn't just always like explicit things. Like it's not like my experience of the world is just like cup, pen, computer, etc. Like a lot of the things that we do, like when we engage with the world, like a lot of things are unconscious to us, but we act as if we just like, we know them. They're already embodied. I am familiar with predictive processing. Nice. So early on in the document, actually, you know what? I think it would just be helpful for me to just kind of point out the, introduction. We introduce everything. This is where we pretty much say, hey, if we're going to understand the world and our freedom within it, then we might as well start with what we have, like the collective knowledge that we have. Like we're going to leverage philosophy, we're going to leverage physical science, we're going to leverage all these things to come up with a good way of talking about how we understand the world and our freedom within it. Can we stop for a moment with predictive processing? There is a connection to physics. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, feel free to write something out. I'm gonna. You know what? I probably shouldn't continue because I don't want you to be focusing on multiple things at once. I won't touch on anything new, but this experience in the moment was what I was talking about, where we go into intuitions about our experience, because we really want to ground this stuff in our intuitions. Like we don't want to give an account of our experience and understanding the world without pointing out how it feels like intuitively. Do I know the work of Chris Fields? I do not. And do I have Chris Fields? I do not have Chris Fields in here as well. So we go through that phenomenology of engagement, of concern, and then we point out, what happens when we actually reflect on meaning. So like when I look at this thing and I think, what is this thing? What are its properties? We point out that those experiences of reflection manifest to us like in an articulated manner. So like, when I think about what I'm seeing a pen. Like I can understand, like this is a pen. Like you can understand like what happens in the world through language, etc. This will blow your mind. Nice. Yeah, let me have it. Let me blow my mind. And then we go into the science of experience in the moment. And so if you got here through my video on homeostasis, this is where we covered homeostasis. And then we touch on embodied cognition, which I didn't fully cover in that video, and then predictive processing. Yeah. Yeah, if I read Making Sense of Experience, that would really cover it all. But this is only experience in the moment. So this is like a snapshot of what is causing the experience that you're having in this very moment. And then we get to the shaping of experience, which discusses how we can understand the trajectory of what we experience. So how our experience changes over time. And that's going to be the next thing that I read through. Like, I've been doing a read through of the Stan Richardson document on YouTube, and the next thing that we have to do is read through this section. So hopefully that will be pretty interesting. But we point out that what we experience is predisposed by, you could think about this as predisposed by our underlying biology, predisposed by what we learned 10 weeks ago, predisposed by our childhood, predisposed by our genetics, etc. So we go into this huge discussion of predisposition, genetics, nature and nurture. Yeah. I guess I won't go too deep into this stuff, but this is where we start thinking about understanding as this aspect of our predisposition, such that when I experience something, like, what must I understand in order for that to happen? And that's where we get into first the science behind our understanding, so neuroplasticity and learning, how that's emotion driven, and then memory, pattern recognition and stuff. We talk about the social context, how that's relevant, etc. And then really this builds up to our philosophical discussion of how we can conceptualize what our understanding is like made of. Like, what is it constituted by? And so this is where we get to the conceptualization of concepts. And so this is a way we can describe our understanding. Like, really, if we were to describe our understanding, it would be through this level of neuroscience. That's really what's happening under the hood, but we want to get out of that neuroscience space and actually talk about concepts, because that's what philosophy is all about. My understanding of freedom is, it is the result of activations in the brain, but that doesn't help me figure out how I can think about my freedom in the world, like what it would, what I should do in order to do something. So that's why we have to get to this conceptual space, and a lot happens there. Oh, this is gonna be a long video. Oh my gosh, but this is gonna be an absolute banger of a video. I guess it's just the read through, but then we talk about freedom, and then we have an epilogue. I didn't build a paper, but I went similar road to you in order to create a useful framework. Nice. What were I guess some of your what's the word? Discoveries. Revelations might be better. All right. While you're working on the Chris Field stuff, I'm gonna continue on Kastrup so that we can get some progress going here. Kastrup's argument begins with a foundational Cartesian-style epistemological premise. The only thing that any individual can know with absolute certainty is the existence of their own subjective experience. All right, so this, as I mentioned, we can actually assault this. One can doubt the reality of the external world, the existence of other people, or the validity of sensory information. So I could actually cast shade on this through the same way that spiritual practices point out that the self is an illusion. Like, consciousness is an illusion. Like, consciousness objectified is an illusion. Even when you think that you're thinking something absolutely certain, when you think that consciousness is the only thing that you know to be certain, that is still, you're leveraging these same you're leveraging the same parts of the brain, but you're doing, it's like doing the same thing that you're doing when you think, oh, myself, my identity as I think it right now is certainly the case. Like, it's the same issue you run into. So yeah, one can doubt the fact that one, but one cannot doubt the fact that one is doubting, feeling, or perceiving. Yes, that's absolutely what we can do, because ontology is disclosed to us. And we, as Heidegger points out, we can't take lowercase b being and run with it. We have to point out that any being that we ever experience is speculative at some fundamental level. Consciousness, in this sense, is the sole undeniable empirical fact of existence. Yeah, so I disagree with this whole bedrock here. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, we can comment on Castro. This chat is really bottlenecking discussion. I am on phone. Yeah, I mean, feel free to bring that up. Whenever you remember and are on PC or just have time to write stuff down. But yeah, I would definitely do a deep dive of Chris Fields. When you say this will blow your mind, do you just mean the work of Chris Fields? Because I could also just throw Chris Fields. I could ask ChatGPT what Chris Fields does, and I mean, that's something that we do frequently on this channel. I just throw stuff in the ChatGPT and ask it to summarize a person as if that's something that is appropriate to do. From this epistemological starting point, Kastrup makes a crucial ontological leap guided by the principle of parsimony, or Occam's razor. He argues that since consciousness is the only thing we know for sure, we should not postulate an entirely different and unknowable ontological category, namely a mind-independent material world, to explain our observations. I agree that we shouldn't do that. Like, I agree that we shouldn't postulate this entirely different and unknowable ontological category, but I don't think we need to argue that we can do that because consciousness is more sure. Namely a mind-independent material world, to explain our observations. Such a move is metaphysically extravagant. I like that. Creating the intractable mind-body problem. The more parsimonious and logically coherent explanation is that reality is constituted solely by the one thing we know directly, consciousness. So yeah, I don't make such a direct argument about consciousness. I think the reason why we know that consciousness is has ontological priority is actually from a lot about what we know of philosophy, culture, and science. Like, the fact that we know about these neural correlates points out that philosophy, or that consciousness, must be the ontological priority here. It's not like that the biological mechanisms actually affect our understanding in some ontological way that is, actually, how would I say that? Maybe it is conceptually coherent. It's rather that my understanding, our understanding, is that the biology affects our consciousness, but we, our experience, isn't privy to those underlying mechanisms unless we have a conceptual understanding about them. So we're always at this significant level of ignorance. His work, his project, and his framework, it's about quantum mechanics and free energy principle. Oh, nice. Okay. All right. Here we go. Can you explain the work of Chris Fields? Especially in relation to his work, his project, and his framework. Also, quantum mechanics and is this called the? Is it called the free like FE principle? I'll just free energy principle and PP. I want you. This is a terrible. Especially in relation to these things, I want you to blow my mind. That's a terrible sentence, but we'll run with it. Quantum information processing. All right, I'll all right, let it rip. Already killing it with the beard. I'll say that. All right, let's get to the end of this little section. In his system, consciousness is the fundamental ontological primitive, the irreducible ground of all being from which everything else derives. All things and phenomena he posits can be explained as excitations of consciousness itself. So this is where we have to be really careful, because I do agree that consciousness is the fundamental ontological primitive, but it's pointing like in a very like Heideggerian sense, like it's where meaning is disclosed or being is disclosed, but it doesn't purport that the things that it's disclosing, like like the jump that Kastrup's making is that meaning is a representation of some thing, and that this thing is being created through the experience itself. So it kind of introduces the what was that gap? What was the gap that Brandon talks about? Spirit of trust gap. This is not it. No, okay. Maybe I gotta put in Brandon. I forget what this is called. It's gotta have gap in it. No. Gap of intelligibility? Well, sure that ChatGPT would know. Maybe we can ask it. All right, but let's get to this. Here's a deep dive into Chris Fields' work, weaving together quantum information theory, the free energy principle, active inference, system identification, and living systems, with an aim to blow your mind, yet remain grounded in what he actually writes. I'll break it into three major parts. What Fields is trying to do is project and framework. Key ingredients: quantum information processing plus the free energy principle, active inference. How it all comes together, his novel claims, implications, and mind benders, some caveats and open questions. All right, Fields' project and framework. At a high level, Fields pursues a bold and integrative agenda: treat physics as information processing, treat observers/agents as fundamental across scales, and reformulate key principles of life/cognition, for example, the free energy principle, in a quantum information framework. All right, so far on this channel, I've pointed out that quantum consciousness is not a path that we want to go down. So we'll see what's happening here. His framework, and there's a whole course on it, is physics as quantum information processing. Oh, nice. So yeah, well, I'm gonna try to be careful here, because the difficulty with quantum mechanics is that it's operating at a scale that isn't specifically relevant when it comes to the brain. Like it's not like there's some quantum externality of stuff that's specifically happening within your, brain and body. And then there were other things that I talked about in that video. This isn't what you think it is. Awesome. Sweet. That's good news. Some highlights of his orientation. His profile at Allen Discovery Center at Tufts University says he is primarily interested in developing scale-free models based on quantum information theory and abstract models of computation that characterize the abilities of living systems to recognize objects in their environments, localize them in space and time, and interact with them as persistent individuals. On his website, what is observation? What is memory? What are objects? What is time? What is space? What is causation? All posed under the umbrella physics as information processing. I see. A recent lecture announcement described his current work, quantum information-based models of multi-observer communication, shared system identification, and consistent embedding of identified systems in a spatial geometry. Reformulating the free energy principle in the language of quantum information theory and first principles understanding of compartmentalization, high fan-in, fan-out morphology, and hierarchical control in biological systems at multiple scales. Wow. So his project is meta-theoretical and multi-scale. He is trying to create a unified framework that spans from quantum systems to living organisms to cognition, using the language of information, agents, and systems and inference. This is future, in my opinion, if it comes to science. What do you, I guess, what do you mean when you say this is future? Like, this is where you think that the future is going in terms of science? Or he's talking specifically about the future? Framework components. Treat any system, even at a quantum level, as an information processing agent / observer. For example, in his paper, Unitary Quantum Theory as a formal framework for a theory of consciousness, he writes observers are ubiquitous at all scales. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, this was a question I was having about quantum mechanics in general, like what constitutes an observer, really. So as far as like I can conceptualize, or yeah, as I can think about these things, there's just what's the word? Two things are linked together. Quantum. It's like a key phrase. Yeah, I'm not gonna remember that right now, but it's a fruitful direction for science. Okay, cross boundaries between disciplines. Nice. My concern, though, is always like my concern when someone uses the same interpretive lens at different levels of abstraction. There's always a concern that they're doing something inappropriate, like they're either knowingly or unknowingly smuggling in inferential weight where people will think, because he's making this analogy or this type of framework, that means we can think about one level or one layer a similar way that you could think about a different layer, even if that's not really appropriate. Boundaries. Nice. Okay. Use quantum reference frames and quantum information. Oh, entanglement. That's what I was thinking of. Quantum entanglement. So yeah, in my mind, the idea of observers is like less coherent than just the idea of entanglement. It seems like anything that can be entangled can just like effectively act as an observer for the whole system. But maybe that's wrong. All right, use quantum reference frames and quantum information theory rather than assuming classical observers and clear boundaries. Reformulate the free energy principle originally introduced by Carl Friston in neuroscience so that it applies to generic quantum systems. Apply this to biological systems, showing how life, cognition, morphology, hierarchical control, compartmentalization can all be seen under this information inference lens. In short, this project is a grand unification of quantum information inference theory, biology, cognition. The framework is anything that persists, so anything that remains a system, must process information, infer, and can be modeled as an agent in a quantum information sense. All right, so just to point out that this is a conceptual interpretive lens, right? Like there's no such thing like innately as an agent necessarily in a system, and there's not necessarily a system, right? Like we interpret that something is a system if we see that, you know, it persists, right? We're defining system by it persists. And once again, like we need a, like, and when I say we, I'm not talking about an observer in the sense that they're, you know, all matter can be this observer. It's got to be this one's got to be human consciousness. Same with the, similar with the topic that ontology is conscious prior. That's not the way to say it. That consciousness has priority for ontology. Boundaries, observers, memory, objects, time, space all become derived notions. Okay, key ingredients. Let's unpack the two core ingredients: quantum information processing plus the free energy principle, active inference. I understand your doubts, but if you watch it, you will change your mind. Everything is clear in this framework. Nice. This translates directly to predictive processing and free energy principle. Yeah, like I understand that the interpretation might map, but I'm trying to be careful. Like obviously I haven't read anything yet, so I haven't read any of the reasoning, but I'm just trying to be transparent about my care here. All right, quantum information processing. Fields takes seriously the idea that physics, and especially quantum physics, must be understood from an information processing observer-centric viewpoint. Some key points. In unitary quantum theory as a formal framework, he argues for taking unitary quantum theory without additional collapse postulates so that measurement, time, space, even systems are derivatively defined. He emphasizes quantum reference frames. In other words, any observer uses a reference frame to make observations. In quantum theory, this gets subtle. For example, in sharing non-fungible information, he shows that for observers to share a quantum reference frame, they must share the operators that define it. Otherwise, decoherence arises. So yeah, this is going to be a serious issue if when we talk about reference frames, we're referring to something that's specifically coherent within the frame of quantum mechanics, and then using that to connect it to reference frames when we're thinking about our brain providing a reference frame towards our experience of meaning in every moment. To be honest, reading ChatGPT is what creates confusion. I don't doubt that. Yeah. Yeah. If there's a video that you know that he like lays this out really well, I don't think we would be able to read it right now or watch it right now, but I could save it for a later date. In neurons is high, so I mean, perhaps I should just ask for it to dumb it down slightly, but also another thing I could ask it is to explain this stuff in relation to the document that I have, which then would make it fit within what I with how I already understand things, which would probably make this be really easy. In neurons as hierarchies of quantum reference frames, he and collaborators model neurons as hierarchies of quantum reference frames, showing how biological structure might instantiate quantum information analogies or analogs. Okay. He also explores thermodynamics. So this is just explaining like parts of the. This isn't giving the like this isn't giving like the comprehensive reasoning. So I should take that also. So the upshot: Fields treats quantum information processing not just as esoteric quantum computing, but as a foundation for modeling observers, agents, systems at all scales. About who is observing, even generic systems can be regarded as observers/agents. So free energy principle, where does this takes the work and pushes it further? He and Friston, that's cool, reformulate the FEP in a quantum information theoretic way for generic quantum systems. They show how quantum systems can be regarded as observers/agents that minimize prediction error or surprisal in a Bayesian sense. They show that in the quantum formulation, FEP becomes asymptotically equivalent to the principle of unitarity. They argue that biological systems may exploit quantum coherence not only for computation but for communication. All right. So let's get to the FEP becomes a universal principle of inference/agency in his framework. Any persistent system that interacts with an environment must, in effect, minimize its free energy. And via quantum information processing, this extends to very generic systems. How it all comes together and mind-blowing implications. Here's where things get wild. If you accept Field's framework, you could start to reinterpret many things, from life to cognition to physics, differently. Some of his bold claims/implications. Systems as agents, observers at all scales. He claims generic quantum systems can be regarded as observers with freedom of choice assumptions, as agents capable of assigning semantics to observational outcomes. Thus, the boundary between observer and system observed blurs. Even what we call inanimate systems might be considered as minimal agents if they persist and interact. Okay. In a 2025 preprint, Life, Its Origins, and Its Distribution, he suggests that if complex dynamical systems that persist can be considered Bayesian agents via FEP, maybe life is not sharply distinct from other persistent cognitive systems. That I would be susceptible to. Like the idea of abiogenesis itself must involve some sort of starting of a system that persists by definition. Yes, we could focus on what you want. I just signal things. ChatGPT don't give you a sense, right, of what it is about. No, I do like the it's giving me a sense of scope, at least. It's not giving me the comprehensive reasoning, but it's giving me an idea of what they're going for in scope. The mind-blowing thought: if we treat any system that persists as an agent processing information, then the universe may be full of agents, and what we call life is just a special case of information processing persistence. So yeah, I agree with all this, but I always caution that when we think now of the universe full of agents, we ought not anthropomorphize these agents, right? We ought not think that these agents are conscious beings themselves that are human-like in behavior or in thought or in consciousness. Like, it's an interpretive lens that you're putting on things, and that can be an effective interpretive lens. Okay, quantum information plus biology plus morphology. Biology's hierarchical morphologies may be driven by the need to minimize free energy via information processing. So this is really cool, and I think this is a phenomenal direction. For example, and also this makes sense. Like, it makes sense that these systems would still be driven by these fundamental principles of free energy, right? So yeah, I'm now kind of backwards getting into where I think that the start was, and yeah, I would be very stoked about this type of framework, because that's we come up with these frameworks on cognition, but cognition's at such a high level, it would be now cool to now consider what is causing the trajectory of not only evolution. So evolution involving like when cells are single-celled organisms to more complex cells, and finally to brains. Like what is actually driving this evolution, and like what is being maximized for, or what's being made more efficient along the way. And it would make sense, like it's very intuitive to think that the same principle that we notice is very much clear at the highest level of cognition and what's going on in the brain would be also occurring at smaller scales. And then but we have to interpret at some point. Now we have to interpret what I think human life, like or life is probably the farthest you can go. Like I would then be skeptical about keeping that same principle past human life, where we now point out that like when we talk about our culture now, like the development of cultures as following a similar type of principle, now we have to redefine what energy means. Like, actually, no, we don't. You know what? We don't have to redefine what energy means, because similar with the idea of predictive processing and minimizing energy across people, though, it would be something similar. Like we're trying to minimize the negative emotion that we all have to experience, and that's what leads us to our equilibriums. So this is the social dynamics of coherence. What do we say in this? What's in this subsection? Yeah. As we previously outlined, a major evolutionary leap occurred with the development of complex nervous systems and eventually a limbic system. This introduced a new powerful layer to the internal state, affective embodied experience. The stimulus response loop was now mediated by feelings like fear, pleasure, or pain, marking the dawn of a recognizable subjective experience. We can see the intuitive origins of predictive processing as the brain evolves from a simple reactor to a sophisticated predictor, guided by the felt quality of its experience. The expansion of the prefrontal cortex provided the capacity for unprecedented levels of abstraction, etc. This evolutionary journey culminated in the specific biological disposition that is the common ground for modern humans. This is the nature we are born into. Social coordination was inextricably connected to this entire development. We can most appropriately think about language here not simply as words, but most abstractly as any communally developed stimulus response system, chemical, audio, visual, etc., that allowed communication among organisms. For humans, we can think about any social space actually so this is what Damasio does also. He talks about social spaces and social coordination, culture, etc., through the lens of homeostasis. So, it's like I say potato, you say potato. I say free energy principle, you say homeostasis. We're talking about the same thing at the end of the day. I can write you a post on Reddit or something. Yeah, I mean, if you want to, feel free to. We've got a ghost town of a subreddit right now that I do need to add stream summaries to. We are kind of late on stream summaries, but we'll add them. But yeah, if you want to put a post there, go for it, and I'll definitely I'll probably go through it on stream, and we could talk about that stuff. Right, for humans, this abstract language becomes a crucial part of the environment that each individual's predictive brain integrates. When one individual produces a signal, it acts as a powerful piece of sensory data for another, creating a cascade of predictions about the first individual's intentions, beliefs, and future actions. This constant interactive loop of signaling and modeling is the very mechanism by which thought is negotiated and meaning is shared. We should just say meaning is negotiated and shared. Meaning is shared and negotiated. Okay, so we talked about the ball one effect, but yeah, that's not super necessary in this. Yep, it is crucial to highlight that at every step of the way, the development of culture and our evolution was still grounded in personal biological mechanisms of the organism. The primitive's brain's drive for survival provided the fundamental behaviors of approach and avoidance within the social context. The limbic system then layered these behaviors with profound affective meaning, making social inclusion feel like a rewarding pleasure and exclusion feel like a painful threat, thus providing the emotional engine for cooperation. Finally, the prefrontal cortex provided the capacity to model these complex social realities, to understand abstract norms, and to wield the new tool of explicit structured language to navigate this intricate web of relationships. All right. Yep. So yeah, pointing out all this stuff. This social environment presents a crucial and complex predictive landscape for the human brain. Our survival and well-being are deeply tied to our ability to successfully model and predict the outcomes, intentions, and beliefs of other people. So, our own system is dealing with the free energy principle, and this allows us to, why not Discord? You could do Discord as well. I should check Discord more frequently. Yeah, but yeah, Discord's great because if other people are on there, they would do that. The ghost town of the subreddit is not popped off yet, but at some point it probably will, and then people can decide where to post, either Discord or subreddit. But yeah, if you think that the discussion would lend better to Discord, then definitely go for it. Right, as we have thoroughly reiterated, this predictive process is powered by a potent affective engine. So yeah, this affective engine costs energy, and that's the whole idea. So we can think about society and social populations at large through the free energy principle, though I wouldn't say that their behavior. I don't know if their behavior is similar. I'd have to look in depth. Do I have an invite? I think in the chat. Yeah, in the chat at 8:27. I don't know if YouTube shows the time, but there was a join our Discord invite link, which I think works. Please let me know if it doesn't. All right, let's jump back over. The shape of life, brains, neural networks, even cells dividing could be seen as optimized information processing architectures mandated by quantum information inference constraints. This boundary between physics and biology dissolves. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Or I mean, that's plausible in my mind. I would have to see the proof of that. But if he's got Friston himself, then I imagine he's going in the right direction. Reformulating time, space, objecthood, causality. All right, he argues space and time and the notion of bounded objects or systems are derivative rather than fundamental. Observers, via their information processing, impose boundaries, reference frames, object identifications. Right. Yeah, the question though is, he has to answer the same hard problem of consciousness that we all do, is like, how do you go from those systems that are following these principles to the concepts as they're experienced themselves? Thank you, Onion Helmet. We unfortunately we haven't made too much progress on the Kastrup thing, but we're jumping into interesting stuff here. which I think I do want to look into. This stuff isn't necessary for our document. Like, it's really not that necessary, but it is like a very, very interesting facet. He further explores how obtaining information from a system involves irreversible free energy expenditure, linking the holographic principle in physics and with information processing costs. Okay, the objects we see, the time that flows, and the space we occupy may be emergent from information exchanges and inference processes by observer/agents. Perhaps at every scale, reality itself is a dance of information, agency, and inference. All right, but yeah, I gotta see how they deal with the problem, the hard problem. Like, how do you take the representations of brain activity and connect it to what we feel in the moment? And yeah, this is what my next video is going to be covering. Implications for cognition and consciousness. Consciousness might not merely sit atop biology; it might be inseparable from the fundamental way systems process it. So this is our view. This is our current view. This is the same view as homeostasis. It's the processes themselves that are causing this. Actually, you know what? I can't say causing for sure, but it's strongly correlating. It seems that the consciousness we experience is caused by these processes, like that it's literally the processes that are the experience. And the way we're going to try to handle that connection in the video is by looking at the what we might describe as like the atom of experience. Like, what is the smallest bit of activity that creates our experience? And yeah, I think we can have a good discussion about that. We can't conclude anything until science gets there, but we can point out where we ought to be looking, and what we know of in that space already, which we do know a lot. It might be inseparable from the fundamental way we systems process information, infer, and reduce surprise, potentially extending beyond conventional brains. All right, I'm sold. I'm sold. I like the way that this is going. Caveats and open question. Okay, so I do want to see though. Is this document? No, I should say how commensurate is this document? Document's account of conscious experience is Chris Field's. What was it? It was perception. It says it early on. It names it. It names the theory. Physics as information processing. So, if I understand this correctly, and I probably don't, I think it's highly commensurate. But let's see. That could always just be the error of confirmation bias. All right, tomorrow we're gonna continue. We're gonna do a Bernardo Kastrup part 2, and perhaps we do bound ourselves to only working on Kastrup. Not to say that this I'm quite glad we went down this path, but we just for the sake of we don't have any extra days to work on Kastrup for at least this week. I think we're gonna have to prioritize it. Based on the document provided, its account of consciousness experience appears largely commensurate with the high-level principles of Chris Field's physics as information processing framework, although they operate at different levels of description and use different terminology. Okay. Here's a breakdown of the alignment and differences. Commensurability. Physicalist foundation. Both the document and PIP frameworks are grounded in physicalism, materialism. They assume that consciousness and subjective experience arise from physical processes governed by consistent laws without invoking non-physical substances. Active modeling / prediction. The document heavily relies on predictive processing and mentions the free energy principle. This aligns strongly with a core aspect often associated with PIP. The idea that physical systems, especially living ones, maintain their integrity and coherence by actively modeling and predicting their environment to minimize surprise or prediction error. The document frames perception, learning, emotion, and agency as arising from this predictive cycle. Emergent subjectivity. Subjectivity / consciousness, not as a fundamental substance, but as an emergent property or process from the system's interaction with its environment. Right? PIP often frames it in terms of how a system partitions the world based on information exchange relative to its own boundary. Observer system relative reality. The document emphasizes that we don't experience the physical world directly, but interact with a mental model or neural image constructed by the brain. It also highlights how predisposition, concern, and projection shape the specific possibilities and meanings that appear in experience. To be more clear, that we could think about our experience through the lens of predisposition in the way that our experience is predisposed based on our understanding or priors of any kind. Concern. This is more of a phenomenological pointing out that we always find ourselves caught up in some concern or engagement. And projection is a way we could think about literally predictive processing, projecting possibilities on us. Like our brain is always forward looking. Like it's always like on to the next thing. I can't find Discord link. Any hope? Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. That's so troll of me. I'm guessing that Stream Elements. Oh, thanks, Onion Helmet. I'm guessing that Stream Elements doesn't make it to YouTube. Though it probably should. It should say maybe like Twitch. Let's double check this because it's kind of important. How do we get here? How do we do this? Do we just view my channel? There we go. All right. We've got. No, wow. That is surprising. How does Stream Elements do that? It's right before ChatGPT. Wow. What is going on? Yeah, there's nothing here. That's a real shame. So how does Stream Elements get away with posting here without it going to YouTube? That might be a mystery for another day. I might write that down though. All right. Yeah, sorry about that. All right, let's skedaddle. The differences in level and emphasis. So yeah, I'm guessing level of abstraction. This goes to lower levels of abstraction. Often employing concepts from quantum information theory to describe physical systems. Generally, this document operates at a higher level, focusing specifically on human consciousness experience. Yeah, but what I'm guessing is there's nothing in the document that precludes the going lower. This document uses psychological and philosophical terms. PIP uses physics and information theoretic terms. Focus, the document provides detailed account of biological mechanisms and phenomenological qualities of human experiences that arises from predictive models. PIP focuses more on the fundamental information processing principle. However, that we did see that one paper did touch on maybe the overlap. I'm in. Awesome. Thank you very much. The document acknowledges that. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, but the Discord's also kind of a ghost town right now. So please fill it up with with some living things. Not to say ghosts are bad. Actually, ghosts are kind of in style right now. But PIP, particularly when linked with FEP, sometimes aims to reframe or potentially dissolve the hard problem by defining subjectivity in terms of the system's modeling of its own boundary and interaction with the world. So yeah, once again, homeostasis, this framework, etc., they purport to dissolve the hard problem, and in my mind that makes sense. It's just very unsatisfying to someone who wants to get the answer through a lens that actually connects what they believe to be the mind versus the body. Like it's someone who has the dualism, and they're trying to get a description that makes it non-dualistic in some way. Or no, I think they're trying to get a description that actually connects the dual things. In summary, the document's framework, particularly its reliance. Okay, yep. Would it be apt to say that nothing in the document precludes the possibility of interpreting lower levels of abstraction through the PIP framework? Yes, it's reorientation. Ah. I think this is all good and fine. Yes, that is an apt statement. Nothing in the document precludes interpreting the lower levels of abstraction through the PIP framework. In fact, the document's foundational assumptions make it highly compatible with such an interpretation. All right, that's pretty cool. We gotta check out Chris Field's research for some fun bits. Okay, what does the PIP framework? You know what? I think with the fact that it dissolves or reorients that hard problem, like I don't think we're gonna get a satisfying answer of actually filling in the gap. If the PIP had to respect the premise of a gap, I'm going to say theoretically, had to respect the premise of a gap, of a hard problem gap, how would it go about filling this in? Is it equipped to specifically look at the neural regions associated with consciousness itself, and then point out how these regions are designed or developed in a way conducive with the PIP? Because this is what we really need. We need to look at, like, what could we actually point to in the brain, which I think we know where we can point to in the brain that actually affects conscious experience. Like, we know the areas. Then really what this is a discussion of is the configuration and brain activity. And I'm wondering if Fields has done this. Based on the documents framework, grounded in predictive, okay, and the principles of PIP, here is a theoretical path for how PIP could approach this. To answer your second question first, yes, the PIP framework is uniquely equipped to look at specific neural regions and analyze their design, though it would do so from an information processing perspective rather than a purely biological one. Conscious neural regions. The PIP framework, especially when combined with the free energy principle, uses the concept of a Markov blanket, which is a statistical boundary that separates a system's internal state, for example, the neuron, from external states, the rest of the brain, by a set of blanket states, so the sensory and active states like a cell membrane. Okay. The document's framework assumes the brain... Okay, we don't need the document, though. I'm going to just say... Forgetting... Actually, you know what? I should throw this on here. We should just do this on this chat, since this chat is not this chat hasn't been tainted by the document. To be honest, you will know more after watching half hour of his lectures instead of reading chat. He makes common sense, very logical statements directly from physics, but with angle on QM and FEP. Yes, MB is important concept. Nice. Yeah, no, I don't doubt it. I'm totally bought into this approach. I would just need to see the empirical evidence for this framework, this interpretive framework at each level of abstraction, and then, you know, I could see it. I could easily see this coming to fruition. Short answer: a PIP approach can't solve the hard problem. My experience feels like anything by derivation alone. If it respects the gap, it must add a disciplined bridge from formal informational structure to phenomenology, and then show that specific neural architectures implement that structure, right? All right, below is a clean way to do that without hand waving. What respecting the gap would mean for PIP: no brute reduction. Don't pretend functional physical facts entail qualia. Add a bridge principle, minimals, testable. Tie invariance of experience to invariance of information processing without claiming identity. Think law-like correlations rather than metaphysical reduction. A workable bridge, one sentence. Phenomenal invariance of an agent's... what does this logical symbol mean again? Two-way relationship, such as logical equivalence in mathematics and logic. Oh, okay. Phenomenal invariants are logically equivalent to invariance of an agent's generative model across nested reference frames under bounded free energy. Okay, so I understand that, but like, I'm trying to get PIP to jump out of its shell here. Like, which specific areas? Okay, intuition, stable ways the world appears correspond to stable constraints in how an agent encodes, predicts, and coordinates information. Okay, yep. From dendritic compartments to thalamic loops. Okay. What are corticothalamic loops specifically? Okay. Chat. What's special about these loops? Because they form the core feedback circuitry of the brain's information processing system, linking the cerebral cortex and the thalamus in a dynamic bidirectional framework. Okay. Okay. That's worth knowing. Oh, here we go. Clinical and cognitive importance. Disruptions in corticothalamic loops are implicated in schizophrenia, absence, epilepsy, attention disorders, sleep dysregulation. These loops are thus core to consciousness, attention, and sensory awareness. Okay. So how would PIP fill in the gap without erasing it? Right. Is strongest on the explanatory structure, but yeah, we need to get to the nitty gritty here. Axiomatize the phenomenal side. Use only phenomenology you're prepared to test. This isn't great. Map each axiom to an information theoretic constraint. All right, show concrete implementation. So this is probably not what we would want to do. You know what? Maybe this is what we want to do. Oh no, this is a discussion of how you would go about neural correlate experiments. But you would want to map these things to both structure and activation. So yeah, and activity. So unity, high mutual information, shared precision across submodels at a common time scale. Right. Factorized but coupled. Okay, but yeah. Yay, okay. So this is great. Oh my gosh, this is actually doing the work for me. Structuredness, factorized but coupled latent causes with stable reference frame alignment, perspective control, theoretic loop that centers prediction on a body anchored frame. Oh, this is crazy. The fact that you could do this in LLMs is insane. So yeah, show a concrete implementation path in brains. Don't claim consciousness equals X. Instead, these circuits implement the constraints that, via the bridge, covary with what we report as conscious contents. So this is like looking at, this is like, do we have this still? Oh, don't we have this in here? Yeah, we do. Oh, yeah. Neural trajectories of conceptually related events. So this is a preprint. It's not been peer reviewed yet. But this is the type of thing that this is talking about. So yeah, the neural states corresponded to the accumulated trial-to-trial affiliation and power relations between the participant and each character, such that each relationship's history was captured by its own neural trajectory. So this is pointing out specific activity that was similar between different people in different situations, that were in different similar situations. So it's pointing out that a specific part of our brain is being activated in a similar way that leads to this type of similar experience. I'm late on here. Shout out to Stan the Man for being one of the few sane people on this website. Oh, thank you. This lower level connection to structures of bacteria, for example. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the brain is a very, very, very complex thing to model. I agree. Kastrup is a guru, in my opinion. He believes in magic. I love this guru talk. I'm waiting to be what is it, decoding the gurus? I just want to get on this gurometer. Do they have a gurometer chart? Is he on this, by the way? No, is this just posts? Do we have a gurometer chart? Oh, yeah. Oh, but this is... Okay. Here we go. Do we have a... Man, Daniel Dennett is scoring well. So, okay. Ideally, we actually do want to get on the bottom here, but I think it would be funny if we got up top. Is Bernardo here yet? No. Nah, he's not. That's unfortunate. I mean, this was 2 years ago, so maybe I should have just done decoding the gurus, Bernardo. If there's a video, nah, I don't think they have one. Because that would have been actually great to watch as a compliment to what we've been doing. I'm back, but not for long. Welcome back. One question. How do you correlate weak emergence theory with Hegelian phenomenology? They directly contradict each other. Yeah, let me see if I can like do this in an even more succinct way now that I've said it a few times. Yeah, I think the physical processes in our brain and body affect the conscious experience we have. And our conscious experience is one in which meaning seems to, be disclosed for us. We phenomenologically, we can see that a certain meaning is disclosed, but we don't experience the physical world directly. I'm seeing a pen and not atoms and energy, etc. So we can think about how do we want to make sense of what is disclosed in our experience. In the document, I do that through concepts. That concepts are the things that we experience. Now, the other thing that we get from phenomenology is that it's not that we're like always experiencing things explicitly. Like when I see this as a pen, that's I'm reflecting on this thing, and my experience is one in which this is obviously a pen. We could point out that the feeling of certainty when I feel that this is a pen is one that's affected by our underlying affective mechanisms in our brain. But with phenomenology, we can also point out that a lot of our engagement with the concepts that we understand is unconscious. Like I could use a pen without having to think about what a pen is. And also, when I think about things like a pen, like there's so much that I implicitly understand. We can consider this, as subconscious or unconscious, or perhaps it doesn't actually mean that I have to consciously think that I know all these different properties of a pen when I think about what a pen is, or when I think I want to use a pen or I want to get a pen. So the way that we leverage Hegel is specifically just when we're talking about concepts, and really I'm leveraging Brandom, who did a specific interpretive reading of Hegel through his theory of mind. So we could think that the concepts that we understand are related to each other. We could think about concepts through these relations as semantic relations of incompatibility and consequence. That because this is a pen, therefore it is a writing utensil, or because this is a pen, it is not a pencil. Those are like relations of those are semantic relations. But then the thing that we get out of Hegelian conceptual relations is the normative aspect. That not only can I think that because this is a pen, it's therefore semantically a writing utensil. I could think that it's really that we can think about this as, because this is a pen, or because I think that this is a pen, I ought not say that this is a pencil, or I ought to also believe or act out that this is a writing utensil. Like these same semantic relations we can think of as normative relations, like they're rules, such that a cat is by rule not a dog. If you were to look at a cat and say that's a dog, you would be wrong. Like that's like you're breaking the rule. And the idea of rules is really nice because we could actually see how humans learn, like what actually happens in their brain as they learn things. When someone says something that you think is wrong, you experience some cognitive dissonance, and sometimes this can be rather unpleasant. And so we can make sense of all this stuff through the free energy principle. Our brain is designed to reduce prediction error. So this like negative emotion that we experience when things are like highly salient and negative and wrong, in fundamental ways that contradict what we believe about the world most fundamentally. So this is pointing out that the truth, most philosophically, most fundamentally, is subjective. Like it's this is pointing out the ontological priority of consciousness. So for each person experiences the world feeling true in a certain way, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean like objectively in some transcendent way that it's actually true. That's your experience in the moment, and our experience is dynamic. It's constantly changing. What we understand is constantly changing. It's dynamic. We know that from the neuroscience underneath the hood. So then, the next tricky part is to understand how can we make sense of truth as we colloquially use it, like how we understand it. And we do that in the document as well, where meaning is somewhat like negotiated. Like when we're talking with each other, we're kind of we're communicating and we're affecting the Vackerson, how's it going? Welcome. When we communicate, we kind of we affect what each person's feeling, and you don't want to, like, people are very much incentivized to not say something that's going to make the other person attack them, or they're disincentivized from doing that. People were very much constrained with what they could say or people are constrained with what they can say in groups and social groups. This is like almost like an equilibrium we arrive at, where we all can communicate in ways where we understand what we're trying to say, pragmatically speaking, and that we don't, so that we're not creating this negative emotion in everyone. So you can't go into a mall and start yelling, heinous things, or you'll be kicked out, arrested, maybe. Now, 1,000 years ago, it was even more serious. You couldn't say certain things, or else you would be killed, or you would be exiled. So, like you can think of truth as something that is dynamic, that is affected by, all kinds of things. Like, truth is also affected by the constraints of the physical world. Like, one of the reasons why our understanding of the physical world is such that it is non-psychological, in the way where it would still be that way even if people weren't experiencing it, is because it's so unforgiving. Like, regardless of what I think, like, it's going to behave in a certain way, or at least my experience is going to behave in a certain way when I walk into a wall. So that's like what gives the credence of the concept of the physical world. That's why we give it the property of having some type of special say and as to what meaning should be. But once again, meaning is ontologically fundamental to consciousness. Like our consciousness is what is actually disclosing meaning to us, to each of us. So okay, I don't know if I answered the question completely or satisfactorily, but okay. I don't think they've covered him. He's not famous enough yet. Okay. Yeah, for some reason I feel like I've kept seeing or hearing Bernardo Kastrup just like in the wild and in chat. Maybe just people in the philosophy space are paying attention to him. But yeah, I thought that it deserved a full day, especially since the content on this channel recently has been consciousness focused. Now, granted, we really don't have to stay, consciousness is just like in the path. It's not really that important for where we're heading, but I thought it was necessary to do this type of actually, I didn't know that Kastrup was actually specifically talking about the stuff that we've been talking about in videos and on stream recently. So that was actually pretty welcome. I was really just wanted to jump into Kastrup because I knew he was some sort of idealist. Do they affect it, or are they the experience itself? Okay, this was related to this was related to the underlying biology affecting our experience. Yeah, so that's the tricky part of the question, right? The hard, like a lot of these contemporary neuroscientists truly argue that their framework, whether it's homeostasis or whether it's the PIP here, I already forget what it stands for, physics information processing, something like that, something information processing. They argue that their framework dissolves the hard problem because it points out that the mechanisms are the experience itself. Like, my experience is homeostatic signals. It's my brain telling me the state, and this experience is directly the catalyst for a bunch of other mechanisms. Similarly, for the PIP, like my experience are the free energy principle maximized, or maybe not maximized, but efficient processes, etc. But the thing that we really want to get at is like, or not the thing that we really want to get at. I think that what I just said is one direction we could go down. What I think that the people who are really set on the hard problem being a thing, like they have this dualistic view and they want to fill in this hard problem, I think we could still try to appease that point of view, and we could look at, okay, specifically what in the brain is affecting certain aspects of our conscious experience, and like what is actually the correlate that makes sense of consciousness. So it wouldn't actually be the molecules in our brain, it would be the activity that happens in our brain. Like that's what's actually creating the conscious experience. And not only that, we could get in. So the next video I make is going to get into what we know, like how close we could get to this gap without our eyes getting wet. All right. I'll have to read the document and then form my questions, LOL. I'm still working on that video in reply to your view, but I'm just and also lazy as hell, a horrible combination. No worries. A little hint about the document, even though, the best version of this document is the long version. Part 1, there is a main takeaways version, which is approximately 1/4 as long, and that is only 28 pages. So I would recommend doing that if you just want the general gist of what's going on here. But at every step of the way, it gives you the opportunity to just jump into the full version of that subsection or section. So I'm trying to hyperlink this document to the gills so that it's really easy to use. So I believe that there is a mind. I'm gonna go full Jordan Peterson here, but it depends what you mean as a mind. And when I say that, I mean like I could argue that there is a mind, and I could argue that there isn't a mind, but I'm gonna be talking about two different things when I make those different arguments. So it depends what we're specifically trying to talk about. I'm an analytic idealist like Kastrup, but some people who follow him aren't philosophically inclined and treat him like a god/guru. Embarrassing for actual thinkers. Yeah, we got to watch out. And that also puts more responsibility on us to be really precise about what we're trying to say, so that, like, I need to be precise so that people who view this content or read this document don't come away with implications or inferences that I'm not intending. Inferences that we might all, or I might find as inappropriate, which would be like going in the guru direction. Like really, like, yeah, I'm not. What actually puts you on the gurometer? Is it getting people to like do stuff that would, I don't know, financially serve you? I think that this document's pretty clear in terms of like what power people have, like what freedom each person has. Yeah, and then it's just going to be a bunch of tools. It's going to be a bunch of tools to help you out. So I think we would score pretty low in the Gurometer. The whole premise, like, because we think about concepts through the idea of norms, it means that we can always think about what we say in the document and on this channel as things that we're allowed to say or not allowed to say. So that means that we have to be precise about specifically like how much conviction we have towards something, whether something is certain or like certain in like a, you know, a scientific way of talking, or certain, you know, in an ontological way, or whether we're talking what is possible versus plausible, and being precise about what context we're in, talking about in that sense as well. Yes, the classic cult of personality. Haha. I mean, we should always keep open the option of making this a cult. I mean, like, we can't close that door, but your view is probably the most unique of consciousness I've ever heard, and I'm very intrigued. Nice, thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to just follow the path of like what we're allowed to say and what we're not allowed to say. Like what our science and neuroscience does tell us, or allow us to say, right? Because a lot of these are interpretations. Like homeostasis is an interpretive framework. Like it's not like when you look at the physical world. Like if you were to study physics, like homeostasis is something that just screams out at you. Like it's a way we interpret really complex stuff, and you know, interpretation is the homeostasis, the interpretation of homeostasis is grounded in a lot of science that Damasio has done, right? Like I didn't include that in the video that I made, but there is a lot going on in terms of why he has that framework, and it's, you know, it seems pretty grounded. Granted, there's an argument to be made that it's not like you can never get to 100% certainty when you're dealing with science, but you could get to a point where you are very much allowed to say that is like a very well grounded and evidenced framework. Oh, what is this Gurometer? Have 13 or more standards of evaluation? Does it really? All right, what are the standards? Let's figure this out. We're past 3 hours of stream, so we might need to come to a close promptly. But what are the we should do a day of the Gurometer. What are the 13 standards of evaluation for the Gurometer? We should also put the document in and see where the document would. Oh, this is fun stuff. I thought you were a regular eliminative materialist until I started watching this live stream. Did you get that from the video? I guess from the Alex O'Connor challenge. Oh, is it called that? Is it literally called the Gurometer? I couldn't locate a reliable source listing 13. Okay. For the Gurometer used by the podcast Decoding the Guru. What is clear from available materials is it's described as a checklist of traits or red flags. Okay. Can you outline these traits? In one episode, they say it's composed of 10 key characteristics of gurusity. A summary list. Okay, let's do it. Galaxy brainness. All right, the evaluation framework used by the Decoding the Gurus podcast to assess guru-like public intellectuals or influencers. These traits aim to measure patterns of rhetoric, epistemic behavior, and audience manipulation. Nice. Nice. Yeah, I'm glad that video did as well as it did, because I've just been screaming to Onion Helmet in the void. Yeah, I've been screaming to Onion Helmet for the past year and a half. So, to be precise, we could say that for humans, more relative is the term allostasis than homeostasis. Yeah, right. Isn't allostasis the predictive processing sided one? In response to changes in the environment, it involves a series of adjustments that occur to ensure that the body remains in a state of optimal flow. Okay. Yeah, I think this is like like it's not synonymous, but it's like I don't know, a lower level. Like homeostasis is like the most broad concept we could talk about, and then allostasis is a little bit in from that, and then I gotta figure out who's it. Is it being you? Being you. Allostasis. I have to actually do the job of reading this. Right. So the way that Damasio defines homeostasis is not in line with this. Like Damasio specifically points out, it's not just the regulating, but it's also the, and I tried pointing this out as the flourishing aspect, but it's like the developing forward. There's like a forward looking aspect that allows you to be to effectively regulate in the future. So that would be something like learning or predictive processing. Yeah. Yeah, Damasio's version of homeostasis, he specifically addresses that, and he points out specifically that it's not, what he's not looking for is equilibrium. Oh yeah, living organisms are not like that. I agree. So yeah, I think Damasio's in line, but I think it was Anil Seth has. Is this the predictive processing guy? I think so. I think this. I need to read this book, but I think this whole book is kind of talking about consciousness through this predictive lens as well, through the allostasis lens of predictive processing. Okay. Oh, here's a good question. So this message was deleted by a moderator by Stream Elements, but did it last, or did it make it to YouTube? Because that's going to be an issue if that doesn't work. Also, I do like the emojis jumping up on screen. What do we got here? Oh, I clicked the wrong one. Nope, it works. It gets in there. That's not good. I'm gonna have to configure YouTube to similarly filter chat. Yeah. Okay. Well. Right. We're looking for the gurometer here. Galaxy brainness. This describes a guru's tendency to make extremely abstract, grand, or metaphysical claims, often connecting wildly unrelated domains into a sweeping pseudo-coherent worldview. It signals overconfidence and intellectual overreach. So this is the thing this entire stream been trying to caution us against. Like we need to be very careful about the context with which we're talking. Yeah, a good example was when I was talking about energy with Dharmadam earlier, where when we talk about energy in terms of physics, we can't relate, or we can't say that that's the same energy that we feel like when we're talking about our conscious experience, or the energy of someone who's charismatic, etc., or the good energy the universe gives us. Like these are different things, and yeah, it would be inappropriate for us to make those the same thing, or try to purport that they're the same thing. Cultishness measures how much a guru fosters a devoted in-group that treats them as a quasi-prophetic authority. So this one's on you guys. You can't do this. You're not allowed to do this, or else we're going to score. We're going to score too highly. This includes discouraging dissent, creating insider vocabulary, and promoting a sense of us versus them. Okay, so I think we're going to be actually pretty chill on this one, because I think we're not going to go for this. Like, the whole point of what we tried to do is be accessible. So we want to be accessible. We want to use intuitive language. The whole idea is we should be able to communicate these ideas to anyone. Promoting a sense of us versus them. Now, despite the fact that I say we all the time, I would try to make that so that it's a we, as in like all the viewers can feel like they're we, not like us, like you know, there's only the in group. And then, yeah, we don't want to discourage dissent. We want to take it head on. Anti-establishmentarianism often positions themselves as brave truth tellers defying corrupt institutions. I'm genuinely scared of the truth-telling aspect of you know, of this position that I'm in, where, you know, like the idea that that truth is ontologically related to consciousness is very controversial. Even to like materialists like a Sam Harris type, like he would not like that type of speak, even though I think it is an important thing to say in the context of these like philosophical discussions, because these discussions can reveal so much about how we understand and experience the world. But when we're in like a different context where we're talking about truth as in like the colloquial version of truth, then we ought not like die on the philosophical hill. Like we should probably use whatever language is being inferred by other people. So like we don't want to you know, be too provocative, like intentionally provocative. While skepticism can be healthy, this often slides into wholesale rejection of legitimate expertise. Okay, on this channel, we are pro expertise. We are pro I don't know. It depends what we mean by mainstream media. Mainstream media is actually, we're a little more skeptical of mainstream media, but we're pro academia, and there's many systems that we are pro of, for sure. Yeah. We could do a whole video on that, but I'll do it when we get to the point. I will be going. Thanks for the discussion stream. Yeah, thank you for coming in. Thanks for discussing, and I enjoyed talking through this stuff. A lot of good fun. A lot of good. It's good exercise for all of us, and a good challenge. I will write a post. Great. Yeah. No. Thank you very much. I'll make sure to check out the Discord. See you later. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the day. All right, grievance mongering. Many gurus build a brand on shared resentment, portraying themselves and followers as victims of censorship, political correctness, and conspiracies. I think this is just one of those things that we're going to steer clear from. Narcissism, self-aggrandizement, refers to excessive self-promotion or portraying oneself as uniquely insightful, persecuted, or misunderstood. Yeah, no, we should be chill with this one. Yeah, it should always be like our first idea that if critics don't get it, that there was like a failure on our end to communicate precisely enough. That said, if we have done a good job, or like if we feel like we've done a good job of being as precise as we possibly can while being accessible, then like I think that we just have to accept a certain level of error. Like there's going to be just, you know, people that either just don't understand it or are perhaps entrenched in a different belief system. And yeah, that's fine. There's nothing special about you know, one interpretation. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say that, because one of our premises is like we can evaluate interpretations based on how effective they are at like how pragmatically effective they are at being accessible, so that like people, you know, are compelled by them, but also being practical so that they can be leveraged. And that's kind of the whole point of this document. So what's special is that it's perhaps just the fact that we are, you know, working towards something that is practical. But obviously, you know, how we got here is completely contingent. What do we got? Cassandra complex. Gurus frequently warn of impending catastrophe that they will foresee. All right, so this I didn't ever think about doing, but we should just do this for fun. Like, this is just a fun bit. Societal collapse. Actually, you know what? Whenever we talk about AI, I am pretty doomer, but that's completely unrelated to other stuff we do. All right, revolutionary theories. They often claim to have discovered a paradigm-shifting idea that overturns conventional wisdom across multiple fields. Now, this is the one thing that I will buy into. I do think that this is like specifically just part one. Part one stuff, I think, is kind of revolutionary in philosophy, in that I think I've talked about it in some sense demolishes like the previous practice of purporting that the world is a certain way. Like, it points out how we can think about the world in many different ways, and to make the point that the world is a certain way, especially in some like philosophical rule set that's rather abstract or you know, opinionated, like that would be inappropriate. And so yeah, it's destructive in that way, but then it's also, you know, I feel like constructive of how we ought to do philosophy. Like, it's almost pointing out that, hey, like, when you make a philosophical framework, you have to point out that this is a philosophical framework among many that you could do, like, and what makes yours more valid than others. And that's like the argument that you have to like make, but it's probably not valid. It's like, what does your framework provide that others don't do? Because at the end of the day, people are going to just infer different things from different frameworks. They're going to either understand it or not understand it. They're going to infer how to do things in their own lives based on that. They're going to infer different connections with other things they've learned previously. That's why it's so beneficial to ground a philosophy in science, because a lot of people can easily ground that stuff in stuff they know, stuff that they could trust. We also ground this in intuition. So we want this to be like phenomenologically salient. Okay. But I do think it would be okay, never mind. I was going to say, I do think that it would still be a good bit to do this thing. I don't think that the stuff, though, I don't think that what we're purporting in this document is like portrayed as ignored or suppressed by the establishment. Like, none of the stuff that we point out is like really novel. It's really just piecing a bunch of things together and pointing out logical implications as we see them. All right, pseudo-profound bullshit measures how often they use vague or grandiloquent. Come on, this has to be pseudo-profound bullshit, this word. Language that sounds deep but lacks clear meaning. It's common in self-help, spirituality, and techno-mysticism circles. All right, we're going to be pretty chill with this one. I don't think we're going to be getting into that realm. Conspiracy mongering. Gurus often connect unrelated phenomena into intentional malevolent plots. All right, we should be good there. Grifting, monetization. I think we should be chill. We're going to keep this thing free. Even though I think I do want avenues for monetization so that I could work on this stuff all day and not have to go to my regular job, I'm going to try to make anything that's like actually important for people to like use. I think the general philosophy for monetization for this channel is going to be all the helpful information should be free, and then all the specific community excitement information, or like the like only stuff that is really exciting for people in the community, like they really want to, like I want to make it so that only people who are excited to contribute to the community are needing to contribute. It shouldn't be the case that if someone wants to, you know, read the document, that they have to buy something. um, is this on a countdown? Is this just happening periodically? All right, 9:40. Oh my gosh, it is late. Okay, I think we should do well. I think we should be chilling. But I think another day we should definitely ask Gemini where it would put us in the gurometer. Oh, I did want to read this too. All right, we got to do this tomorrow. We got to stop. I think we could get rid of this guy. Yeah, let's get rid of this one. And then let's save. We have to continue with Kastrup, and we have to continue with all of these as well. Oh, what was I going to do here? I was going to ask what Kastrup would think. Maybe. Yeah, maybe we could get to that later. All right, and then don't question it, my king. Oh no, that's you're gonna get us on the gurometer with that language. If imagine everyone hops on and they're all just like, "My king, good morning." I think we're done for. Even though that would be a pretty good bit if it was specifically just to get high on the gurometer. But that also goes into the inside jokes. So, you know what, I think that would scare people away. Even though I think the bit would be funny, I think it would be detrimental to the community at large. All right, Don Hoffman. We got to look into Don Hoffman. And we got to read that. Okay. All right, we're cleared. All right, I gotta end this 3.5 hour stream. Thanks for joining in. I'm glad that we got some YouTube representation. It would be cool to have to grow the grow both audiences at the same time. That being said, I could be very mindful once I start getting into a contract with either of these companies to make sure that I could still do this if I do end up growing a platform on both. I guess we could always just jump to YouTube. I guess that would be more pragmatic, but I don't know if that's not as fun. I really like Twitch. I guess just the vibe of it. But all right, I gotta hop off. Thanks, y'all. Have a good rest of the day.